We're going to wait just a minute, make sure that our vice chair has her technology in order.
Good morning.
Oh, there we go. We can hear you and see you. Can you hear and see us?
I can hear and see.
All right, we are good to go. Good morning, everybody. The time is 10:02. It is April 13, 2023, and I call this planning board meeting to order. We have the following board members with us. We have a full complement. We have Vice Chair Bailey and Commissioner Washington.
Morning.
Commissioner Dorner and Commissioner Giraldo. And I am Chair Shapiro. Please note that the deadline for all participant pre-registration for all submission of materials and exhibits was 12 noon on the Tuesday before this planning board meeting. Registered speakers may join the meeting with a link provided in the email provided by the planning board office, or listen by phone by utilizing the caller number provided in the email. And of course, anyone may tune in to watch the planning board meeting via live stream. If you wish to speak or become a person of record, you may use our online web form, which you'll see referenced on the screen. In addition to the commissioners, we are joined by our Deputy Planning Director, Derek Erlage. We have David Warner, our Principal Counsel. Jessica Jones, our Planning Board Administrator. Joe Parsons, our Senior Technical Hearing Writer. James Hunt, the Division Chief for the Development Review Division. And we have staff members Kenneth Flanagan and Ryan Crowner helping us with technology behind the scenes. Thanks, everybody. We are going to take the order of cases as they are listed on the agenda, and we'll start with item 2. I would look for a motion to approve the draft minutes of April 6th, 2023.
Move approval.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
We'll move on, and for what it's worth, Vice Chair Bailey, you are listed on our sheet as Vice Chair Dorothy on the screen.
That's fine.
Okay, all right. Just want to make sure. It feels very warm and familial. I like it, but just want to make sure you knew too. The consent agenda is our next action item. I would look for a motion to approve the, well, actually, before I do.
I'm sorry, you didn't get your vote in the final vote for the minutes.
Oh, I didn't vote. Okay. On the draft minutes, I vote aye as well, and the ayes have it 5-0. Thank you. Next is the consent agenda. Is there anyone here who wishes to oppose the staff's recommendations on item 4D, or is any board member who wishes to discuss this item? Seeing none, I look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
After consideration of the record for item number 4D, I move adoption of the staff findings and approval of the items on the consent agenda in accordance with the recommendation of staff.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. No discussion. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. We will now move on to our regular agenda items, beginning with item 5. This is a reconsideration of preliminary plan 4-08002 Westphalia Center. We have Bill Shipp representing the applicant and Eddie Diaz-Campbell, who will give a brief staff presentation on this item. Mr. Diaz-Campbell.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, I'm Eddie Diaz-Campbell with the subdivision section. Item number 5 on the agenda is a reconsideration hearing for preliminary plan subdivision 4-08002 Westphalia Center. At the February 23, 2023 planning board hearing, the planning board granted the applicant's request to hear a reconsideration to modify condition 19 of Prince George County Planning Board Resolution number 09-93, adopted on June 25, 2009. The board granted the request for reconsideration based on other good cause in furtherance of substantial public interest. The applicant's request, laid out in their January 24, 2023 letter requesting reconsideration, pertains to the applicant's requirement to dedicate land for public use as a transit center on the south side of the property. Specifically, the applicant requested to either remove their requirement to dedicate the land entirely, or else to be allowed to dedicate or convey a different parcel of land within the Westphalia Center for the Transit Center. For the reasons discussed in the staff memorandum prepared for this reconsideration hearing, staff support allowing the applicant to convey a different parcel of land known as part of Lot 7, which is located on the west side of the property. Staff supports modifying Condition 19 and recommends modifying Condition 1R of the resolution, as well as adding a new Condition 55, which will require the submission of a new preliminary plan set for signature approval, showing the new location of the transit center. The applicant concurs with the staff recommendation, and there are no citizens signed up to speak on this case. Staff recommends that the planning board approve the reconsideration of preliminary plan of subdivision 4-08002 to amend conditions 1R and 19, add condition 55, and amend findings 3, 9, and 14 with the specific changes outlined in the staff memo. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? None. Mr. Shipp, anything you want to add?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, William Shipp with the law offices of Maui, Miles, Nyland, Gilmore, and Greenbelt. I want to say a couple things if I could, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to keep it very short, but first I want to start out by saying I really do appreciate the efforts of Mr. Diaz-Campbell. I know you have read the staff report, he lays out the history and the analysis very well. Maybe I shouldn't say this better than I did. So I really appreciate his work, but also the effort to make sure we caught any references to considerations in the additional condition besides the change that we had specifically requested for to make the record clean, which I know is important. This condition was put in when the preliminary plan was approved in 2009. At that, we were in a different spot. The general plan was talking about the possibility of rail service being extended here. Westphalia Town Center was designated as a major metropolitan center, the highest intensity center in the county. And as you know, when Plan 2035 was adopted, the priorities within the county on planning these centers was revised, and Westphalia was, I don't want to say downgraded, but shifted to a lower intensity of a local activity center level, which coincided with the fact that there was no indication of extension of Metro Rail to Westphalia anymore. And in fact, it's never come up in any substantive discussions. I did have discussions with WMATA and the representatives of the bus within DPWT, and they had both conveyed that they had no plans to own or operate or construct a transit center, which led us to get to this request. And they confirmed that in various ways with the responses to the referrals. We had thought about the possibility of removing the condition altogether, but DPWT had asked to support, they had concurred with the idea which we proposed in the alternative site being dedicated to the county for this purpose, and they would like to keep that possibility open should a transit center in the future be needed. There's only one bus line servicing this area. There is no Metro Rail, so I think there's lots of justification for this request, but we do not object to Public Works comments about conveying the alternative parcel next to the fire EMS station. The only other things I want to add is that condition 19 that we're talking about originally did not designate a specific property. It was discussed as part of the application, and when the plan was certified, it was located where it is now. And then the CSP also has language saying parcels can be moved around, and there's flexibility in later approval. So there's a lot of justification for moving this, but there's also justification for the reconsideration in that the situation has changed with the adoption of 2035 and the evolution of Westphalia Town Center. We did have some meetings. We had a kind of a town meeting with the residents, and one of the things that was noticed was the potential of of addressing the transit center parcel, and nobody in the meeting brought that up as an objection or any concern at all. It was mainly focusing on future retail considerations. So we have had no objections from anybody, no operating agencies or public objection. And we very much appreciate the board's willingness to reconsider this condition. And now today, we would very much request your consideration of the staff's recommendation with the changes to the findings and all of the condition revisions.
Thank you, Mr. Shipp. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you have to make this motion because none of the sitting board members were present for the adoption of the preliminary plan, if I'm not mistaken.
Mr. Warner?
Thank you, Chair. David Warner, Principal Counsel. That's the rule for the reconsideration request. That was honored already. This is the decision on the substantive request, and that is a decision for the board anew. So the five of you make this decision collectively, and anyone can bring the motion, but normally the chair doesn't, right?
Good enough, Commissioner Washington?
Absolutely. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we adopt the analysis and recommendations of staff and approve the reconsideration for preliminary plan 4-08002 to include revised condition number 19 and condition 1R as part of the resolution, in addition to the new condition 55.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Schiff. Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, we have item 6 on our agenda. This is an extension request for a preliminary plan 4-19044 Metro City. We have Ms. Scudder, who's representing the applicant, Mr. Heath. Antoine Heath will give the staff presentation. I will turn it over to you, Mr. Heath. We can't hear you, Mr. Heath. Oh, now we can. Now we can. You're good.
Hear me? Okay. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Antoine Heath. With the subdivision section, item 6 is an extension request for a preliminary plan of subdivision 4-19044 Metro City. The applicant is proposing a 1-year extension request until May 13th, 2024. Staff finds that the required criteria has been met, as stated in the staff memorandum, and staff is recommending approval of the extension. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heath. Commissioners, any questions for staff? If not, I'll turn to Ms. Scudder. Anything you want to add? Introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning, Chairman Shapiro and members of the Planning Board. For the record, Tracy Scudder of Scudder Legal representing the applicant this morning, and Mr. Andy Interdonato, the developer, is also present. I would like to thank Mr. Heath for the presentation. We agree with everything he just stated. We've also had an opportunity to review the report prepared by staff, and we concur with all the findings and the recommendation. We are pleased that Metro City continues to move forward, and this 1-year extension will support those efforts. And with that being said, we hereby request that the validity period of preliminary plan 4-14005, consisting of less than 100 residentially zoned lots, be extended for 1 year from the expiration date of May 13th, 2023 to May 13th, 2024, and as recommended by staff. So with that being said, I would just like to thank you all again, and we are happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Scudder. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Scudder or members of her team, of the applicant's team? Seeing none, you have heard from the request by the applicant, you have heard the staff's recommendation, and commissioners, what is your pleasure?
I move that we approve the one-year extension for preliminary plan 4-19044.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Commissioner Dorner. Any discussion on the motion? I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo,
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye. Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Scudder.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of the day.
You too. Next item on our agenda is item 7. This is Countywide Planning Division 2008 Water and Sewer Service Area Changes, December 2022 cycle of amendments. It is CR-014-2023. I'll turn to Mr. Ray.
Thank you, Chairman Shapiro and members of the Planning Board. For the record, my name is Bobby Ray. I'm with the Countywide Planning Division. Agenda item number 7 is a review and recommendation for applications to amend the 2018 Water and Sewer Plan. Again, this is for the December 2022 application cycle. The role of the Planning Board in this review is a determination of consistency with the general plan, as well as providing any information and assistance needed by the county executive and the county council. The memorandum included in the packet provides planning staff's recommendation, as well as the county executive recommendation for each of the applications received. The larger report provides all comments from the planning department, as well as comments from WSSC, DPI, and the county health department. Next slide, please. So at their regular meeting of March 14th of 2023, the county council introduced resolution 014-2023 for the December 22 cycle of amendments. And the public
Mr. Ray,
hearing.
are we in the right slide here?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I believe the resolution reference is there at the bottom sentence there. And this really just to let the board and the public know that the public hearing on this item is scheduled for April 18th. So in this particular cycle, we received a total of 11 applications. Of these, 6 are requests for development of single-family detached homes. The remaining applications are for, there's 2 convenience stores, one seeking an advancement to Category 3, and the second seeking to continue use of an interim system. The proposed currency production facility at the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center has filed an application. Of course, this is also the project that the board recently reviewed as a mandatory referral. The Brandywine General Motors dealership is seeking to tap into a future public system that will be built contiguous to their property. And the Carrazza property, which is a mixed-use development that I believe the board has probably seen on several occasions and is probably familiar with that. So all 11 applications are being recommended by the county executive. Planning staff recommendations mirror those of the executive with one exception, which is the Ratchaconda property, which is located at 7510 Hillmead Road. It's a proposed single-family dwelling, and they have requested a water and sewer category of 3. At the time of the application review, it was determined that the project would require a preliminary plan of subdivision. So the property would then be held at Category 4 until the subdivision action had occurred. We've since learned that the development doesn't need a subdivision application and can proceed directly to Category 3 as requested. So we're asking that the planning staff recommendation be amended to reflect the water and sewer Category 3 rather than 4 as it's currently recommended in our report. The county executive's recommendation on this item will be addressed at the time of the council hearing and also at the TIEE committee review. And that really concludes staff's presentation. And I'll attempt to answer any questions that you might have on any of the specific applications. And I do believe that Mr. Haller has signed up to speak on this item as well.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Commissioners, questions for Mr. Ray? No
Have you,
questions? I'm sorry,
just-
go ahead.
So the item you're just talking about was the one that instead of going to category 4, we're recommending going to category 3, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and then the only other one that we have slightly different kind of recommendations compared to the request was the I think it was the Raconda property that we didn't go quite as broad as what they had wanted to. Have you talked with the applicant on the request and why we didn't get a sewer category 3 instead of 4?
Which project was that? I'm sorry.
I think it was the Hillmaid Road one. I think it was the Raconda or what?
Oh, the Rachaconda?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I was referring to. The difference in the recommendations was at the time that the county staff was looking at it, they felt that there was a subdivision application that would have to be pursued. And so they couldn't go all the way to the category 3 request. But we since found out that that's not the case, that they're not subject to a preliminary plan. So we can go ahead and go to category 3. So that's the recommendation from the planning staff, is that it be changed to 3. The county executive recommendation is fixed at this time. It can't be, altered because the report's been published. So it would have to be taken up by the county council when it gets to that level.
Okay, so that's the only difference from like the memo then. When originally you had pasted it as 5 to 4, and then it should really be 5 to 3.
Correct.
Okay, now I understand. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions for staff? No further questions. We'll go to our sign-up sheet. Mr. Haller, take it away.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board, Thomas Haller, an attorney with offices in Largo. And I'm representing Mr. and Mrs. Rachaconda on this water and sewer category change. We were somewhat surprised when we got the county executives and the planning staff's recommendation, because before filing the request, we reached out to the subdivision review office and received confirmation that no subdivision would be required. And we knew that that was the predicate for whether you could go to category 4 or category 3. So we filed a request for category 3. When the county executive's recommendation was published, it said that there was a requirement that the property be subdivided. And we reached out to your staff to confirm what we had thought we'd already confirmed previously, which is that no subdivision was required. And they have confirmed that no subdivision is required. The property is eligible to go straight to 3. And so I want to thank Mr. Ray for working with us and recommending a modification to the water and sewer category. And we concur with staff's proposed revision to recommend approval to advance the property directly to category 3 rather than category 4. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Haller. Questions for Mr. Haller, commissioners? No questions. There's no one else who signed up to speak on this matter. You've heard the request from staff, which would be to approve staff comments with the one amendment as described by Mr. Ray. And commissioners, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the analysis and recommendations by staff and approve the December 22nd cycle of water and sewer amendments as detailed in staff's report and as modified by staff exhibit number 1 with respect to the Rachaconda property.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Daly.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Haller. Thank you, Mr. Ray.
Thank you.
Move on to our next item on our agenda, item 8. This is an extension request for a preliminary plan 4-18031 Accokeeks property. We have Mr. Haller, who is representing the applicant, and Mr. Heath, who will give the staff presentation. We'll start with Mr. Heath. Take it away.
Thank you. Good morning again, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Antoine Heath with the subdivision section. Item 8 is an extension request for preliminary plan of subdivision 4-18031 Akaki property. The applicant is proposing a 90-day extension until June 30th, 2023. Staff finds the required criteria has been met, as staff stated in the staff memorandum, and staff is recommending approval of the extension. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heath. If there's no questions for staff, commissioners, I will turn to Mr. Haller. Mr. Haller, floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. Thomas Haller on behalf of the owner and applicant in this case. I want to thank Mr. Heath for his presentation, for his analysis. We concur with the recommendation for a 90-day extension. The only thing that I will say is that even small properties are complicated, and it's amazing how many issues come up. We are right at the very tail end of getting the property platted, but as the staff report noted, we ran into an issue that created a small delay, and the 90-day extension will allow us to complete that process. We thank staff and thank the planning board, and be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Haller. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Haller? Seeing none, no one else to sign up to speak on this matter. Commissioners, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the 90-day extension for preliminary plan 4-18031.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. There's no discussion on the motion. I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
I vote aye, but I didn't have a chance to turn my mic for the discussion. I just have one question later for Mr. Haller as when you get to the stage of coming to us. I'll be interested in knowing why you're not connecting the road into the main thoroughfare, and why you're doing kind of a cul-de-sac right there. As sort of a site layout instead of kind of going through and having more connectivity. So I'm just going to put that into, and it might just be like design and sort of other complications with state highway or other aspects. So I just want to put that out there so you're thinking about it and you have kind of a response later on when you come back.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm sure Mr. Haller has noted that, and we will hear about that when this comes back before us. Thank you. And you vote aye, and I vote aye as well. The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Haller. Thank you, Mr. Heath. Next item is item 9. Before we jump into item 9, I would like to take a 5-minute break. Is that a good enough break for folks? Yeah? Okay. So we will be back at, I don't have a clock in front of me. Oh, 10:35. See you all in 5 minutes. The time is 10:37, and we are starting again. We're starting up with item 9 on our agenda. Let me make sure that our commissioners have gathered. 1, 2, 3. There we go. All here and accounted for. Next on our agenda is item 9. This is a detailed site plan, DSP 22028 Fairwood Square. This was continued from March 30th, 2023 Planning Board meeting. The attorney for the applicant is Mr. Tedesco, and we have Mr. Shelley who will give the staff presentation. Let me, before we hear from Mr. Tedesco and Mr. Shelley, this Planning Board, this is an evidentiary hearing. This may be a new process for some folks, but we have taken up the process in this way for a while now. As an evidentiary hearing, in this case, we require those intending to provide testimony to take an oath. So at this time, I'm going to ask all persons intending to provide testimony to come on screen. You don't have to come on screen, but at least want to make sure that you are, this helps me to understand that you're hearing us. And I'm going to administer the oath. So let me give folks a second to gather. As everybody finds their camera button and their mute button and all those things. Okay, so for all those who are about to be sworn in, do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
I do.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Consider yourself sworn in. Now back to our order here. We're going to start off with a staff presentation by Mr. Shelley. We will then hear from the applicant, beginning with his representative, Mr. Tedesco, with their representative, Mr. Tedesco. We will then hear from folks from the public who want to speak. The way we'll manage the time on this is Mr. Tedesco and his team. I don't know how much time, Mr. Tedesco, you and your team need. You'll have up to an hour. I don't know if you're going to need to take that much time, but you'll have up to an hour. And then if there are parties in opposition, we will give the parties in which I see signed up. We will give collectively the parties in opposition the same amount of time that Mr. Tedesco takes. So that's how we'll manage the time for this. And with that, I'm going to start with Mr. Shelley. You do not have a clock, Mr. Shelley. And you can introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Are you able to hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. Thanks for checking.
All right, great. Thank you. For the record, my name is Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design section. The item before you is item number 9, Detailed Site Plan DSP-22028 Fairwood Square for the development of 200 single-family attached townhouse dwelling units and infrastructure for the future development of approximately 5,000 square feet of commercial/retail uses on parcel 1. Staff is recommending approval with revised conditions as shown in applicant exhibit 1 provided by the applicant and received by the first hearing deadline on March 21st, 2023. As a matter of housekeeping, staff notes 2 minor administrative corrections to the cover sheet of the staff report. The first correction seeks to reflect the accurate acceptance date of this application as January 18th, 2023, and the second correction seeks to reflect the accurate name of the applicant, which is Timberlake Homes BT. This item was continued for 1 week from the planning board hearing on March 23rd, 2023, due to an error listing the incorrect speaker registration and exhibit submission deadline on the planning board website for 1 week. The planning board approved a 1-week continuance to provide the community with time to sign up to speak that was lost due to the website error. The planning board also directed staff to email all parties of record to inform them of the continuance date and information on how to participate. This information was sent by staff on Monday, March 27, 2023. A referral for the development of permitting, inspections, and enforcement, otherwise known as DPI, was received after the staff report was posted and is included in the additional backup dated March 28, 2023. The referral provides comments to the applicant that should be considered when filing permits with DPI, but does not provide any recommendations of approval. This item was then continued for 2 weeks by the planning board at the request of the applicant to allow all parties of record to review the referral provided by DPI. The applicant then waived the 70-day action limit for the case and set a new action limit of April 15th, 2023. The planning board then directed staff to again email all parties of record to inform them of the continuance date and information on how to participate. This information was sent by staff on Monday, April 3rd, 2023. Next slide, please. The site shown in red is located in Planning Area 71A and Council District 6. Next slide, please. The Fairwood Square site, shown in red, is located at the eastern quadrant of the intersection of MD 450, or Annapolis Road, and MD 193, known as Enterprise Road. Next slide, please. The subject property is bordered to the south by properties in the residential estate, or RE zone. The subject property is bordered to the east by properties zoned Legacy Mixed Use Community, LMXC, to the west by property zone Rural Residential, or RR, and to the north by MD 450 and property zone Commercial General Office, or CGO Beyond. This proposal was reviewed for compliance with the requirements of the MXT zoning of the prior zoning ordinance as permitted by Council Bill 50/2021 within footnote 144 of section 27-441B. These requirements include density and intensity standards in which staff found all regulations were met. A detailed analysis of these regulations can be found on pages 9 through 14 of the technical staff report. Next slide, please. The The subject property contains a wetland in the southwest corner of the site and 11 specimen trees. The preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21058 approved the removal of 5 specimen trees. No additional trees were requested for removal with this DSP, or no additional specimen trees were requested for removal with this DSP. A phase 2 noise study was provided as part of the acceptance of this application, and staff found that no noise mitigation was required as discussed on page 22 of this technical staff report. Next slide, please. This map shows the adjacent master planned rights-of-way. The site has frontage on 2 arterial roads, which are shown in red, which are MD 450 and MD 193. A transportation analysis was conducted as part of the approved certificate of adequacy, ADQ-2022-020. The site has 2 proposed access points on Annapolis Road, with 1 full access point and 1 right-in/right-out access point, which are subject to the approval of the operating agency, the Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway Administration, as noted in condition 8 of this technical staff report. Next slide, please. This aerial shows the existing nursery site with the existing structures on the eastern portion of the site and the existing woodlands to the south. To the north of the site is Annapolis Road, and to the west of the site is Enterprise Road. To the east of the site are existing single-family detached dwellings. Next slide, please. This detailed site plan, where north is shown to the right, demonstrates the proposed site road layout of the property, consisting of 200 dwelling units on 22.29 acres. These dwelling units are divided into 101 18-foot wide townhomes, which are shown in yellow, 54 20-foot wide townhomes, which are shown in orange, and 45 24-foot wide townhomes, which are shown in brown. 2 site access points are proposed from Annapolis Road. The access point furthest to the north, or in this case furthest to the right, will have full access, and the southern access point will be limited to right-in/right-out access. The development will be connected by a network of private streets and alleys and contain 647 parking spaces, including 3 American with Disabilities Act or ADA spaces and 12 bicycle spaces as shown in the applicant's parking analysis. 4 recreational facilities are proposed and spread throughout the site, providing both passive and active recreation opportunities, and these are shown in the yellow circles. Landscape buffering has been provided along Annapolis Road to the north and Enterprise Road to the west, along adjacent single-family detached residential property lines to the south and the east, and along the private internal street network. Staff finds that the applicant's site layout to be acceptable, subject to the technical corrections as listed in condition 1 on pages 28 and 29 of the technical staff report. Can we go 2 slides, please, I believe? 1 more. Thank you. This plan demonstrates the proposed 10-foot shared use path, which is shown in green, that will be constructed along the property's frontage on Enterprise Road and Annapolis Road. The interior sidewalks, which are shown in red, are proposed to be 5 feet wide and connect the proposed homes in the development to the 4 recreational facilities in the proposed shared use path. 12 bicycle spaces are proposed on bicycle racks located within the on-site recreational facilities. Staff finds this pedestrian bikeway facility plan to be acceptable, and an analysis of staff's findings is provided on pages 14 through 18 of the technical staff report. Next slide, please. This plan, where now north is facing upward, demonstrates the 4 proposed recreational facilities, which are broken up into 3 phases of development. Subsequent slides will provide illustrations of the proposed recreational facilities in each location. A cost estimate of the proposed recreational facilities can be found in the backup. Staff finds the recreational facilities acceptable, subject to technical corrections as listed in condition 1 and conformance to conditions 5 through 7 on pages 28 through 30 of the technical staff report. An analysis of staff's findings is provided on pages 8, 23, and 24 of the technical staff report. Next slide, please. The following two slides demonstrate the recreational facilities proposed to be constructed within Phase 1, which is required to be constructed prior to the approval of the 71st building permit. This facility is centrally located within the development with 4 bicycle racks and 27 adjacent parking spaces, one of which is an ADA space. Recreational facilities proposed include a playground with associated play equipment, benches, and fencing. Next slide, please. And this slide shows an illustrative rendering of recreational area 1. Next slide, please. The following slide demonstrates the recreational facilities proposed within Area 2 of Phase 2, which is required to be constructed prior to the approval of the 110th building permit. This facility is located in the southern portion of development with 4 bicycle racks and 8 adjacent parking spaces, one of which is an ADA space. Recreational facilities proposed include a gazebo, a wooden pergola, benches, game tables, and an ADA accessible panel play area. Next slide, please. The following slides demonstrate the recreational facilities proposed within Area 3 of Phase 2, which is required to be constructed prior to the approval of the 110th building permit. This facility is located in the western portion of the development. Recreational facilities proposed include a butterfly garden, benches, and associated infrastructure. Next slide, please. In this slide, as well as the following slide, provide an illustrative demonstration of recreational area 3 with the butterfly garden provided where there are the orange and green bushes. Next slide, please. And again, next slide, please. The following slides demonstrate the recreational facilities proposed within Area 4 of Phase 3, which is required to be constructed prior to the approval of the 150th building permit. This facility is located in the eastern portion of the development with 4 bicycle racks and 6 adjacent parking spaces, one of which, again, is an ADA space. Recreational facilities proposed include a pergola, fire pit, 3 picnic tables, 2 grills, and turf. 2 dog park areas, while not recreational facilities, are also provided with dog waste stations, which can be found at other recreational areas throughout the site. Next slide, please. In the following 2 slides, will provide illustrative renderings of recreational area 4. Next slide, please. And this is the overview, an aerial overview from above. Next slide, please. This slide provides site details of the proposed recreational facility equipment, which will be distributed across the 4 recreational facilities areas as noted in the previous slides. I would like to draw your attention to the ADA accessible panel area equipment, which is provided in the top right corner of this plan with those 4 pieces of equipment. Next slide, please. This TCP2 plan has been reviewed and deemed acceptable by staff, subject to conditions 2 and 3, as indicated on pages 29 and 30 of the technical staff report. An analysis of staff's findings is provided on pages 24 through 27 of the technical staff report. Next slide, please. These next 2 slides illustrate the architectural elevations for the 18-foot wide rear-loaded one-car garage townhouse units. All proposed units for this application will come in multiple facade variations and incorporate a variety of materials, including brick, siding, and stone veneer. Dormers, decks, awnings, and other architectural details are included in the facade designs and add appropriate visual interest to the building designs. The 18-foot wide units are comprised of a single model, the Madeira, which has a base square footage of 1,740 square feet. Next slide, please. And again, next slide, please. That is the rear elevation. Slide 24 demonstrates the highly visible side elevations for both the 18-foot and 24-foot models. Staff has provided a condition known as 1J on pages 28 and 29 of the technical staff report to generate engaging street views for the proposed architectural elevations. This includes increasing the provided full brick, stone, stucco, or other masonry treatment on the first floor for all highly visible elevations. Next slide, please. Next 3 slides illustrate the architectural elevations for the 20-foot wide rear-loaded 2-car garage townhouse units. The 20-foot wide units are comprised of 2 models, the Foxglove, which has a base square footage of 1,888 square feet, and the Redwood, which has a base square footage of 2,238 square feet. And this is the front elevation. Next slide, please. This is the rear elevation. And next slide, please. This is the highly visible elevations and the side elevations. Next slide, please. These next 2 slides illustrate the architectural elevations for the 24-foot wide front-loaded 2-car garage townhouse units. The 24-foot wide units are comprised of 2 models, the Liberty, which has a base square footage of 2,450 square feet, and the Roland, which has a base square footage of 2,831 square feet. Staff finds the architectural elevations with this application acceptable, subject to condition 1J as previously discussed, and 1P, which requires the labeling of all optional and standard features for the 5 building models on the DSP cover sheet. Staff finds the revised conditions in applicant exhibit 1 relating to architecture acceptable, modifying the number of highly visible end units from 29 to 27 and removing condition 1I, which was seen as duplicative. Next slide, please. And again, next slide, please. This slide illustrates the proposed entrance monument sign and the associated landscape plantings. This entrance sign will be located within a landscape island at the northern full access point to the site. The proposed sign will be primarily constructed of brick. The name of the development, Fairwood Square, and the developer, Timberlake Homes, will be presented over painted vertical slats with a metal canopy. The sign will be approximately 10 feet high by 32.5 feet wide. Staff finds the proposed signage acceptable, subject to a condition which requires the applicant to provide a signage schedule on the detailed site plan set. Next slide, please. The urban design section recommends that the planning board adopt the findings of this report and approve detailed site plan DSP-22028 and type 2 tree conservation plan TCP2-003-2023, subject to the recommended conditions as well as the revised conditions shown in applicant exhibit 1. This would conclude staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Commissioners, questions for staff?
Yeah, I have a question.
I have a question. Go ahead, Mr. Dorner, Commissioner.
Okay, so I'm not a fan of front-loading units for townhomes, and I don't think we've seen much of this over the past 5 or 6 years, maybe the past decade in the county. Like most of the stuff that we have for townhomes are rear loading and sort of private alleyways that go behind there. Partially because front loading just prioritizes cars, and there's a lack of community, and it just looks ugly, looks terrible. It reminds me of suburban sprawl that we're hopefully getting away from. So why are we okay with that? I mean, what makes it okay to have this as like architectural designs for this particular project?
So I will let the applicant get more into the details of their proposal, but I would say it's where the location of the front-loaded units. So these units are located, if we go back a few slides, I believe it is slide number 8, please. Okay, so the front-loaded units are only going to be the ones in the darkest color, so that dark brown. So they are primarily located on the periphery of the site. So staff felt that the architecture and the front loading was acceptable in those locations.
Why don't we try and make the units like if I'm looking at the kind of left-hand side where you've got the yellow and kind of the brown units there, why didn't we try and attach those together and round the alleyways around that a little bit? And maybe make the street between the yellows a pathway, like a pedestrian pathway. So that way you could have like a different kind of design on this. Like, did you attempt to do that or with the applicant or not?
That was not considered at this time, I don't believe.
Okay, can you go back to maybe, I think it was like slide 12 maybe as well? There's like a visualization of like the playground kind of area or like a green kind of area in there. So I'm happy to see in here like the bikes and sort of the bike racks in this artistic rendering. I'm not happy to see this as being an island where kids are going to get hit by cars, potentially coming out of garages or pulling out of the parking spaces right there. I can see some lady who's about to get hit with her dog and her kid in a stroller. This is, to me, like absurd at best in urban design. If we want to have a sort of pedestrian-friendly community, we've got kids who are going to be running back and forth between garages to this island of a playground right there, where it's protected by cars who are going to hit them as they're pulling out and not watching for them. And there's no crosswalks or anything to protect people in there that are visible. To me, I hate this design, to be nice. I think it looks terrible. And maybe it's not staff's fault for this, but I expect staff to do a much better job at pedestrian safety. And I just don't see it here. Like, I don't see any kind of, I see a number of things that if you're in an urban one class of how do we kill people, you could point it out as this being like a terrible design that's not pedestrian friendly. That would just make me very upset as a professor if I was teaching the class for this to be the design that comes before as something that comes into our community. And I'll stop there for right now, and I'll just let that kind of sit in. And it's not necessarily to staff as like a criticism, because you're not doing the architectural design, but this should never come before the planning board without it being much better done. And I'm just going to stop there.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't disagree with you either as we're looking at this slide, so I appreciate you bringing that up. Commissioners, other questions for staff? Commissioner Giraldo, I believe you did.
I did have one. Is the dog park going to be in the phase 4 recreational area?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and that's not inclusive of the $294,000 for the recreation, is that right?
Yes, that is not included in the 240,000. That's just because dog parks aren't in the recreational facility guidelines.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, they said one minute. You said 249, but I'm looking at the staff report, and it says that the recreational facilities cost estimate is actually 294. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. My apologies.
Okay. All right, thank you. Nothing else, Mr. Chair.
Building on your question, though, Commissioner Giraldo, the phase 4 for the dog park, is that after, what was that threshold number of units for that? Is that 150?
So that is the 150
first unit?
Correct. Correct.
So my understanding is there will not be a dog park until 150 units are built or permitted?
Correct, based on this proposal, yes.
How do we feel about that, Commissioner Giraldo?
It's kind of late in the game. You're going to have all those people living there already.
Yeah, I'm having the same reaction. Okay, let's put this on the list as well. Other questions for staff? No other questions for staff. Thank you, Mr. Shelley. And let us now turn to the applicant, Mr. Tedesco. You may want to introduce your team such as you see fit, and also give me a sense of how much time you think you need and how you want to proceed on this.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. Thanks for checking.
Great, thank you. Good morning. Before I do introductions, I probably 20 to 25 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. I didn't time myself, so it may be shorter, maybe a little longer, but I would guess around that time frame.
Sounds good.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board, my name is Matthew Tedesco with the law firm of McNamee Hosey in Greenbelt. On behalf of the applicant Timberlake Homes, represented here today by a number of members of the Timberlake Home organization. We also have with us our civil engineers from Soltez Engineering, our traffic engineer, although traffic is not germane to a detailed site plan. We do have our traffic engineer, Mike Lenhart, with us. And we have our acoustical engineer, Mike Stiano, with us this morning as well. Mr. Chairman, you all may remember this project. We were before you back in October 20th, 2022, on the preliminary plan of subdivision. Not to be redundant from that hearing, but there are a couple of high points from my presentation from that hearing that I think bear repeating at this hearing, so your indulgence is appreciated. Timberlake Homes is a privately held home building company that has been involved in the development and construction of residential homes located in Prince George's County and regionally within Maryland and Delaware for many decades. Frank's Nursery, and thank you for putting this slide up. This is the appropriate slide. Frank's Nursery, as this property is known as currently, has existed until going out of business and operated for decades on the property. During that time, the area around Frank's Nursery has dramatically changed. And change is hard. We understand that, we recognize it. But the world around Frank's has changed since Frank's has been there. Major infrastructure has been developed along Maryland 193 and Maryland 450. The 1,104 acre turf farm, now known as Fairwood, was developed pursuant to the MXC mixed use community zoning. That consists of 1,799 dwelling units, a mix of single family, detached, attached, and multifamily. Over 350,000 square feet of commercial, retail, office, and institutional space. To the north, the Fairwood Office Park, two mid-rise office buildings, a gas station. The Bell Station Center, although not developed, approved for up to 68,000 square feet of commercial retail space. To the west, you have townhomes along Maryland 450. And in the area, you have big box stores like Home Depot and Lowe's that have come into the marketplace. Two of the three family members of Frank's Nursery have since passed away. The owner now wishes to sell and has chosen to sell to the applicant, who will provide a context-sensitive transitional development for the area. As I mentioned, change is hard, we understand. But the world has changed around the property significantly, and this property has been left behind. The project has been thoughtfully designed to be context sensitive and appropriate with development in the surrounding area. It conforms to all the regulations pursuant to the zoning ordinance, as outlined in the staff report at finding 7, pages 9 through 21. Again, as I mentioned, to the north, there's commercially zoned land developed with 2 office buildings and a gas station and a recently approved shopping center. To the east is Fairwood, a planned mixed-use community of over 1,799 dwelling units. To the west, along 450, there's single-family attached, accessed from Maryland 450, and single-family detached, accessed from Maryland 450 to the south. The development before you facilitates a thoughtful transition from the intersections of 2 master plan arterial roadways, which is the second highest classification roadways in the master plan of transportation, to the large planned mixed-use community to the east and the commercial offices to the north and east. This development proposes 200 single-family attached dwelling units and 5,000 square feet of commercial retail, although a separate detailed site plan for the commercial retail, architecture, lighting, and landscaping will be required. It will provide open space, private roads, sidewalks, and private amenities. After road dedication, this property, which is a little over 22 acres, will have 12.37 acres of open space. That's more than 56% of the property to remain open space. By comparison, if the new zoning ordinance was applicable, the requirement would be 20% of open space required we're at 56%. Under the new zoning ordinance regulations for open space set-aside requirements, again, that would require 20%. This property would qualify for 34.9%. So in all components and aspects, the property exceeds any requirement or understanding of requisite open space. Moreover, in 2019, the county adopted the comprehensive housing strategy, housing opportunities for all. This project meets those strategies. It encourages new context-sensitive development that expands housing types to serve the county's diverse population and distinct geographical character. It right-sizes housing investments to meet the needs of the county and its diverse populations. The strategy recognizes that a wider range of housing opportunities should be implemented. Further, the Plan 2035, adopted in 2014 at page 110, talks about a 25-year forecast in the established communities for which this property is located. It projects more than 12,600 new residential units needed in the existing communities alone. I would like to thank the Fairwood community for its commitment to this project. Leading up to the preliminary plan of subdivision, we had a number of meetings with the HOA board as well as a general meeting with a number of residents. I think there was over 70 residents attended that meeting prior to the preliminary plan of subdivision. And more recently, we had a meeting on Monday night. I want to thank the Development Review Committee of the Fairwood HOA who hosted us on Monday night. We had a very good meeting with them that evening and answered many questions. I know not to the satisfaction of many of the residents. Many of the residents would like to see Frank's Nursery either remain as is, certainly not be developed as proposed, which we understand. There were a number of people signed up in opposition, as well as letters that were submitted into the record, kind of couching the theme of the opposition. You're going to hear today from a number of them the following 5 categories: traffic and APF, density, noise, legality of CB 50 2021, and the effect of CB 12 2023 on this application. I'd like to address each of those, if I may, very briefly. First, with respect to traffic. As the board knows, and as your council will advise you, traffic and APF is not a subject matter for, is not germane or subject matter for this detailed site plan. The tests and analysis completed with the certificate of adequacy performed at the time of the preliminary plan approved on October 20th, 2022, showed that pursuant to all of the adopted tests and standards, all applicable facilities, to and include but not exclusively schools, traffic, public safety, water and sewer, parks and recreation, etc., are adequate to serve this development. You're going to hear comments about how this project is just too dense on 22 acres at 200 units. I will note that 10 units to the acres, half the density allowed in the given land use recommendation for the property. As I previously mentioned, 56% or 12.37 acres of the property will remain undeveloped as open space. Thoughtful and purposeful transition with the 18-foot wide rear-loaded units fronting on Maryland 450 and 193, which again are 2 arterial roadways. Transitioning to 20-foot wide units in the central portion of the development, and ultimately transitioning to 24-foot wide units to the east side of the property. This is context-sensitive infill development. It's consistent with the character of the neighborhood to and include all of the large commercial, office, retail in the area, as well as the 1,799 units in the Fairwood community, which consist of single-family attached and multifamily units. Third, the noise component. A phase 1 noise study was done at the time of the preliminary plan. There was a condition on the preliminary plan that required a phase 2 noise study, which was performed. That study is in your backup at pages 31 through 40. The development meets the county's and COMAR standards and regulations for acceptable noise levels without the need for any mitigation. No adverse noise will be caused by this development itself, given that it is residential adjacent to residential. Fourth, you're going to hear comments about the legality of CB 50 2021, which was a lawfully enacted legislative bill that amended the prior zoning ordinance pursuant to and in accordance with the powers and authority granted to the district council under the Regional District Act. The law is applicable to all properties that meet certain criteria. And the assemblage of the properties that make up this subject property meet the criteria. And that's analyzed in your staff report at finding 7, pages 9 through 10. The record for CB 50 2021 at that time demonstrated that that council bill could apply to over 145 assembled properties, not just this property. CB 50 2021 was validly enacted, and it is appropriate for the planning board to apply it to this case. CB 50 2021 has never been challenged, and the time to challenge the same has long since expired pursuant to the land use article. No case law exists that allows a protestant to wait 1 year, 4 months, and 28 days, or a total of 513 days, before first attempting to exhaust their administrative remedies to challenge the bill. The time for administrative agencies to consider the alleged issues related to CB 50 2021 was at the time that CB 50 2021 was enacted and within the relevant statutory appeal period thereafter relating to the said enactment. The opponents are barred from attempting to now collaterally attack CB 50 2021 by the equitable doctrine of laches. It has been 513 days since CB 50 2021 was adopted. Opponents now claim the law is somehow illegal. The applicant has spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in reliance on CB 50 2021 and obtaining a number of approvals through the development process. Therefore, equity dictates this late challenge is barred. CB 50 2021 enjoys the presumption of validity, and it is the opposition, assuming a challenge to the law was timely made, which it wasn't, who has the burden to demonstrate that the law is illegal. There's nothing in this record or the record of CB 50 2021 that rises to the level of overcoming this presumption. Fifth, you're going to hear about how CB 12 2023 repeals or renders this application moot. That simply is just a mischaracterization of the law. CB 12 2022 has been appealed. I do want to note that CB 12 2023 has been appealed and is the subject of legal challenges in circuit court. Notwithstanding that, CB 12 2023 did not repeal CB 50 2021, nor could it. CB 12 2023 did, however, amend the ability to utilize CB 50 2021 pursuant to section 27-1900 of the new zoning ordinance, not the transitional provisions under 27-1704. Therefore, the limitation of the utilization of CB 50 2021 is exclusively related only to cases filed pursuant to section 27-1900 or 1903 to be more specific. DSP 22028, however, was filed pursuant to a grandfathered application and is being filed and reviewed pursuant to section 27-1704, not 27-1903. Simply, CB 12 2023 has no effect on this detailed site plan. And let me explain. The preliminary plan of subdivision was filed under section 27-1900. Section 24-1900. Section 24-1903B states, and I quote, once approved, development applications that use the prior subdivision regulations shall be grandfathered and subject to the provisions set forth in section 24-1704 of this subtitle. Section 27-1704 then provides, until and unless the period of time under which the subdivision approval remains valid expires, the project may proceed to the next steps in the approval process. And this is important, including any zoning steps that may be necessary and continue to be reviewed and decided under the subdivision regulations and zoning ordinance in effect immediately prior to the effective date of the new subdivision regulations and zoning ordinance. Thus, although the preliminary plan was approved after April 1st, 2022, sections 24-1903B and 24-1704B, when read together, clearly result in a grandfathered preliminary plan of subdivision that then triggers the ability to pursue the, quote, next steps in the approval process, including the zoning steps, in this case, the detailed site plan, under Part 27 of the prior code, vis-a-vis section 27-1704. Consequently, DSP 22028 was filed under or pursuant to section 27-1704, the transitional provisions of the zoning ordinance. thereby triggering the utilization of the prior zoning ordinance, which includes CB 50/2021. In conclusion, and before I completely conclude, I do want to address Commissioner Dorner's comments, but in conclusion, at least for my opening statements, the detailed site plan and the development as a whole is in keeping with Plan 2035's established communities growth policies. It's suitable for medium density, and the Plan 2035's projections for an additional 12,600 dwelling units in the established communities area, which again is reflected on Table 17 at page 110 of the general plan. It is context sensitive by providing and creating a strategic opportunity for infill development at the intersection of two arterial roadways that responds to the context of the large commercial development to the north and the higher residential density development in the LMX zone to the east being Fairwood, and establishes a thoughtful and purposeful transition to lower density to the south. Is it an area where public facilities exist, are adequate to serve the development and meet the needs of the existing and future residents? The development responds to specific targeted strategies of the comprehensive housing strategy. And finally, while the applicant understands and respects the opposition's assertions in this case, everything you will hear from the opposition or read from the opposition mirrors the assertions and arguments made 20 years ago when the Fairwood community was going through the entitlement process. And I would venture to say, and I would hope everyone would agree in this hearing today, that none of those assertions have been proven true as it relates to the Fairwood community. Similarly, this proposed development will be no different. In addressing Commissioner Dorner's comments, let me just say this. With all due respect, the notion of front-loaded towns, especially 24-foot towns, being an anomaly is factually not correct. There are a number of projects where 24-foot wide towns are front-loaded. Similarly, in transitional areas like this, for an example, which this board has approved, for example, Amber Ridge and Bowie off of 301. That has commercial retail, 2 commercial pad retail sites along the frontage of 301. It transitions to 20-foot wide townhomes and then ultimately to 24-foot front-loaded townhomes that back up to single-family detached homes in Bowie. And Mr. Shelley, I think, answered that question very accurately with respect to the transition from the locus of activity of 2 major arterial roadways at 450 and 193, having the smaller units of 18-foot wides along that frontage being rear-loaded, so the fronts face the road, notwithstanding we have berming and significant landscaping along those frontages, and then transitioning to a wider unit of 20s in the middle of the project, and then transitioning to the wider 24-foots front-loaded so that you have backyards and back of homes backing up to backyards and back of homes on the Fairwood side, although there is a sliver of property between this property and the Fairwood community itself. Nevertheless, it's analogous and similar to other projects that have been developed in this fashion. And I think that's important. I do understand your concern with respect to maybe the design. However, this project it meets or exceeds the requirements of the 27548H regulations, which are applicable to this case with respect to materials, percentage of brick, and fenestration that are required. It exceeds the size minimums of those regulations. All regulations for this project are met or exceeded. As it relates to the comments regarding the recreational amenity in the central area, I don't want to speak for staff, but that was something that was discussed ever since SDRC with respect to that amenity feature, having a centralized location of that. The issue with having that location in that central area, one, most of the time we're encouraged to have recreational amenities central to the projects. But in order to make sure that the design elements were appropriate, so you didn't have fronts of houses backing up to the backs of houses, because the 18-foot wide units along along Annapolis Road and 193 are rear loaded, it had to be designed in a way so that the 20s didn't back up to or didn't face the backs of homes. So that's why you have the rears facing that amenity area. Otherwise, you would have fronts facing rears, which both staff and the applicant did not feel that was a good urban design treatment. I will note that there's a circulation plan and a sidewalk plan in your material. I don't have the slide number, but I know Mr. Shelley went through it. We have proposed 10-foot wide shared use paths along the frontage, 5-foot wide sidewalks internal to the site. There are sidewalks internal to that recreational area. I know that image showed residents walking along the driveways. There is actually not a sidewalk on the backs of those driveways. The sidewalks and the crosswalks connect the pedestrian connections to the recreational amenity. Maybe next slide. Yeah, that slide. So you will see around that amenity, if you can zoom into that central location. Yeah, although the crosswalks are not shown there, we're happy. I believe we're proposing crosswalks. If crosswalk, I mean, I've never had a detailed site plan where crosswalks weren't shown or depicted as far as required by staff, but crosswalks will be provided. If not, certainly would welcome a condition to provide those. But all of those units have accessibility to sidewalks and the crosswalks to get to those, to get to that central recreational amenity. So understanding your strong feelings towards it at the initial outset, I do think urban design, your staff, as well as the applicant's design team looked at that very closely and do not feel that some of the issues that you raised will be actually realized given the connectivity of the sidewalks and the overall design of the project. With that being said, Mr. Chairman, I think that concludes my initial presentation. Happy to answer any questions. We did have one exhibit. We had a few exhibits, but one of the exhibits was applicant's exhibit 1 that modified condition 1I and 1R. Condition 1I was a repetitive condition. The detailed site plan general notes already included what 1I was requiring. And with consultation with your staff, we removed 2 units from the high visible list, reducing that only by 2. So I think it was 29 originally, down to 27 high vis end units, and units on lots 192 and 193 were deemed not to be high visible given their locations. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would submit and respectfully request the approval of this detailed site plan, but certainly happy to answer any questions and certainly happy to address any additional comments and rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Tedesco. Commissioners, I'm sure there's questions for Mr. Tedesco and his team. I just want to, because I have a lot of them too, and I'm just trying to think about how much we want to get into what might feel like deliberation before we hear from the public. Let's ask questions of staff, but also save space for more back and forth when we get to deliberation. Because I have some, I mean, to be blunt, I have some serious questions about the design of this that I want to get into with you all, but also want to interact with the applicant about too. So with that said, commissioners, questions for the applicant?
So, yeah, I still have serious issues with this. I'm not concerned, Mr. Tedesco, with the size of the front-loaded units or necessarily like how you're bringing in like different types of housing. Like I appreciate that, and I don't really mind about 20 versus 24-foot units. I don't think in designs that at least I've been hearing and approving with these townhomes that we've been approving front-loaded units in Greater Mass. I know there are a couple places that are more suburban that have attached townhomes, but not in a design like this that's really compact that we have front-loaded garages like on these units. So I don't think that's necessarily consistent with what we've done, because if it is, I've pointed that out in other cases as well. And the one thing that I'm still hung up though on is that exhibit in that island area. I think it absolutely fails on the design guidelines. Whether or not staff allowed you to go forward on it is a different question. But in terms of like parking, loading, and circulation, that we're supposed to be looking at this, like just looking at that, you're the one who submitted the image, and looking at that image, like doesn't at all meet the couple of guidelines that we have in there for pedestrian safety, for keeping cars out of like visibility and minimizing the visual impact of the cars. Sure, it's convenient for the cars. It's not necessarily convenient for pedestrian safety. It definitely is visually obtrusive, and I have no idea what the pedestrian pathways are around it. I absolutely agree that like the visual impact on like the map is fine in terms of thinking about a centralized amenity, but the design around that is just horrible. And I know you've got kids. You just think about having your kids, if you were living there, walking out into the backyard and getting hit as they're trying to go over to the parking area or to the playground area. And that's what I think about when I see this, because I live in a community like townhomes like these. And if I had a townhome right there, like I'm just kind of envisioning my kid running out of the garage and just boom, getting hit by a car pulling back out from the playground area or going around in one of these parking areas. Because what you've given us here is maybe different than what you're intending on designing, but this is what we have before us. And I'm looking for some ways of thinking about like why this is actually even remotely possible or acceptable. You may need some time to think about that. I'm fine if you want to come back later with some of your experts to kind of talk about this, or if you need some time to confer with them. But I'm not at all convinced about this one amenity. I want the amenity and stuff like this, but like how it's set up, I think is just not very well thought through.
I mean, I don't necessarily know.
Mr. Tedesco, I just want to make sure, Commissioner Dorner, is this a question for Mr. Tedesco, or do you want to?
Yeah, if he has a way to convince me, then I'm open. I mean, I'm always open to hearing like what he has, because sometimes he and others will convince me that, hey, this isn't what we're actually trying to do. And that's what I'm looking for, to be able to vote in favor if it comes to that point for a project like this. But as of now, like I don't see it, and I'm hoping that he has other materials or other ways of kind of demonstrating that.
Well, I think we're focusing in on this illustrative, which is really designed to show the amenity space itself as it relates to the area. And if I understand is the concern the fact that there's very little units facing the amenity, or is the concern the parking around the amenity? I will say, I don't believe, and we don't believe, and I don't think your staff believes that there's a safety issue here, else it would have been addressed much earlier. We do have internal sidewalks connecting this. I think this image, in fairness, is a little misleading in the sense that it shows, pedestrians along the driveways on both the right and the top portion of it. Those are not sidewalks, and that's why I think the sidewalk exhibit that was shown before actually tells the better story with respect to the connectivity, pedestrian connectivity and safety as it relates to this amenity. Having amenities central to these projects is not unusual. I've worked on a number of projects where these amenities exist in this fashion with parking around it. We are still trying to balance the need to have parking. I will note that, from a code perspective, 408 parking spaces are required. We're at 645. So if the issue is the parking around it, we are at a surplus of parking. However, we are trying to balance the need for townhouse communities to make sure they're sufficiently parked and not underparked, which has been another balancing component that design teams have been coming up with. But there is a possibility to reduce the parking around this area if that is something that is causing concern or ire for you. I will acknowledge the image is a little misleading with respect to those future citizens walking along the driveways. This is illustrative. The site plan itself, I think, shows the pedestrian connections in that one exhibit much better, and how this central location will be accessed. I don't know if anybody from Soltez or the design team has any further thoughts on that. I would yield to them if they do. Or if Mr. Lenhart has any thoughts on it with respect to a circulation standpoint.
Yes, good afternoon or good morning. Mike Lenhart for the record. One thing I might add is that We could include a series of crosswalks. They could be raised crosswalks with all-way stops at those locations. Efforts on making sure that sight distance is appropriate. The shrubs and bushes and things don't impede sight distance, so that there is clear line of sight, so pedestrians and motorists alike can see, if there's anyone in the crosswalks crossing the street or approaching. There are a series of things that can be done to possibly speed humps along the internal roads as well to control traffic.
Okay.
So, Mr.
President,
in terms of the things that bother me, it's like everything about this image. And I realize this is illustrative and it might not be what it ends up being, but this is what you turned in to give us an idea of like what the case is going to be and what it's going to look like. And when we're looking at our criteria, we have to look at like safe and efficient vehicular and pedestrian circulation within the site. There's nothing safe about this picture. And then we have to think about like, is it visually unobtrusive in terms of the loading areas to minimize conflict with vehicles and pedestrians? Not at all. And then vehicular and pedestrian circulation on site should be safe, efficient, and convenient for both pedestrians and drivers. It's not convenient for pedestrians unless they want to get hit and you want to send them into harm's way. So I don't know how you want to redo this. And I'm not a big fan of like just loading in a bunch of cars. I realize you have to park them somewhere. But if you want to get rid of them in this area, I think that would be a start to improving like the pedestrian safety. I think this image is probably upside down in terms of the orientation for other kind of like images that we have on the map. But at least on this image on the right side of that kind of alleyway, if you would get rid of that and turn that into green space and connect it with what I think is a green area over there that's more contiguous, that would certainly make it more safe and I think alleviate some of my concerns there. But as of right now, like I don't think there's anything convincing to me that you've at all prioritized pedestrian safety or taking it seriously in this document that you have. And even if you turn in visual aids that are supposed to be illustrative, you can't give me a visual aid that looks like it's going to kill people, because that's not at all going to convince me about anything else that you've got in your site. So illustrative or not, you got to do a good job at actually showing crosswalks and other things that aren't going to be dangerous for pedestrians and vehicles, because it factors into my decisions.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner.
May I respond?
Sure.
I would just draw your attention to the sidewalk exhibit, which I think your staff has analyzed. I mean, no staff, no agency has recommended anything other than approval for this project, have not drawn the same conclusions that you've drawn based upon what's proposed. I understand the concern. That being said, I think circulation and pedestrian accessibility has been thoroughly analyzed and reviewed by the experts. And I don't believe, and I would not agree that the design is going to kill people. It wouldn't be recommended for approval if it would. But that being said, as Mr. Lenhart said, if there's additional traffic calming devices that are the board in its discretion feels are necessary, we're happy to implement those, whether that be signage or speed bumps or whatever. High definition crosswalks, et cetera, are all things that can be easily accommodated to alleviate concern. But at no time has anyone at the county, your staff, indicated any of the concerns with respect to that particular design from a pedestrian circulation loading standpoint or safety concern, obviously.
So, Mr. Tedesco, if you had people who actually worked in the county offices, they were reviewing these, live in a place like this, they would immediately raise these kinds of concerns. Because I live in a place like this. I don't care if somebody at DPI doesn't live in one of these houses and says it's okay, because they're looking at it from different criteria. I have kids who wander out into the alleyways and stuff, and I have to think about these things on a routine basis because I'm a user. And being on the planning board, I am one of the ones who has to approve this. And I'm telling you right now, you're not getting my approval if this is how it goes. So I don't care if you say, oh, we'll have crosswalks or we can do these things and stuff. Like, give me concrete things and think about, like, how are you going to implement these and be proactive about it? Because if you just throw out ideas, it's not convincing me. And I've just mentioned that one of the things that could actually improve the safety and the pedestrian activity in this area is potentially getting rid of that one alleyway that blocks, that I think is connecting between two greenways. Because that on this map right here looks like in the very kind of center area would be kind of to the northeast or sorry, northwest of that, to the top left of the kind of area where it's located. I think that would alleviate some of these concerns, because then you don't have this island of a playground right there. And there's no way that you're gonna have young kids walking and say.
Commissioner, let me jump in just for a sec. I hear you loud and clear. I just want to, Mr. Tedesco is not going to be able to address your concerns around this in this way. He's just not. But I'm with you. I share your concerns about the design. And so let us continue forward, and we will take up the design on this whole project that's going to include your concerns as well. So you're not alone with concerns that you have, I promise you.
Okay, yeah, let's move forward, and maybe that'll give them time to think about closing down that alleyway or other ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Commissioner Dorner, other questions for staff?
No, that's it. Let me thank you.
Okay. Or for the applicant, rather. Other commissioners, questions for the applicant?
Not at this time.
Okay. So let me flag for you, Mr. Tedesco, if we can throw up the design, the overall site plan. That should be good. And no, not the recreation areas. Yeah, there we go. That. So yeah, so I'm this is building a bit off where Commissioner Dorner is as well, but at the more macro level for this development. And I hear you that staff has approved this, and I disagree with where we are in this. I mean, part of the concern for me is that given where this is located, the amenities for folks who live here, they ain't walking to it, right? They're not walking across Annapolis Road, 193. So really what serves this community is going to be the amenities, the immediate service for the community, the amenities that are there. I want to see this enhanced. I think the amenities for this site are really important. And I think that I would like to see, I think the only way to do this is to see a little bit less density and a little bit more pedestrian orientation and centralized green space. I'm looking at this and I don't really see anything that's close to a central green or anything like that, or any kind of a pedestrian oriented gathering place. It feels like it's just more of a rabbit warren of townhomes. And let me just say, and maybe I'm channeling Commissioner Dorner a bit, but I'm coming off of my own experience, and sometimes that matters. So I had experience in a townhome development quite like this called Greenbelt Station, where I stayed for about 5 months. And one of the things that I loved about that, some of the things are actually quite similar to this, which is, with all due respect, Mr. Dorner, there were front-loaded townhomes, front-loaded parked townhomes along the edge of the development, similar to what's being proposed here. And I actually thought that it worked. But the other thing that it had, Mr. Tedesco, the other thing that it had was a centralized green where the amenities were there and folks would walk there, and it became the focal point for the development. And it was a very important part of the development. I don't get that here. I'm missing it in some way, shape, or form. So I'm concerned about the design. And then there's the piece around the elevations that are more visible from the roads, and I didn't quite get where staff was coming from on that either, but I didn't like what I saw. I'd like to revisit that a bit and have more of a conversation around that. So I have some concerns about the overall design of this and the way the density is set up here that, give me pause. So that's what I want to get at. And with my fellow commissioners, maybe under deliberation, because I also want to hear what folks from the public have to say about this too. But I would like us to take this up under deliberation and see where you all land with this design. Because at this point, if I were voting on this right now, but I haven't heard from the public yet either, but I'd be more inclined to send them back and have them come back to us with a redesign of this that's going to make this a more pedestrian oriented and amenity focused development. So, Mr. Tedesco, if you want to react to that, feel free, but also commissioners, I'm wondering if you have any other questions around that as we move to hear from folks in the community.
Mr. Chair, I don't have any questions. I mean, other than I thought one with the dog park coming in so late in the process. But the other thing is, it appears very dense. The planning, and that's a concern I have with all that density there. I mean, I appreciate what Mr. Tedesco said in terms of the 53% green space.
Right.
Certainly doesn't look like it.
No, and I'm with you, Commissioner. It's less about what they are required to do and what is available to them, because I think they're not exceeding any of the limits around the requirements. For me, it's just a design issue, and I agree with you. The way this is designed, it feels like it's designed too dense for the property, and so all the pedestrian amenities feel like they're too chopped up, and I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, there's no central gathering place. It doesn't seem. I understand what you're saying, but yeah, that nothing to draw.
It's a missed opportunity. Yeah, right.
The only thing, if I have the privilege to respond very quickly.
Yes, sir. Please.
Yeah, we're certainly amenable to working with staff on conditions that address these issues. I'm quite confident between your staff and the applicant, we could address all of this vis-a-vis a condition. That being said, with the climate action plan that was recently adopted, I think we all have to kind of get used to the idea of having more cluster density to accommodate climate action plan to have additional open green areas. So, all of these projects have an economic component to them. And I know visually how it may feel or appear, but that's going to become normal. And this project is no different with respect to ensuring environmental stewardship, open space, green areas. We're going to have more cluster density in closer locations. That is actually what the direction that the county is going in with the climate action plan and other types of plans, while also balancing the need to accommodate the housing strategy plan that was adopted to create a variety of housing types for multiple opportunities so that everyone has the opportunity to own a house in Prince George's County. There's nothing that builds wealth more than home ownership. And so we have to accommodate all these things. And while I hear the concerns, which I understand, we as a design team and the applicant's design team and your staff are intimately familiar with these types of issues. And I'm very confident that we can formulate language or conditions that address both Mr. Chairman's concerns, Commissioner Dorner's concerns, and Commissioner Geraldo's concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Tedesco. So let's continue. If there's no other questions for the applicant, then let's go on to folks who have signed up to speak. I want to run through a bit of process here just to make sure I'm not missing anybody. So I'm going to read through the names of folks, and then we'll see if I've missed anybody. So as I read your name, if you could just sort of acknowledge that you're here. You can come online if you want, but you don't have to, just so I can hear your voice. We have, and then after I go through it, raise your hand if I missed you, or speak up if I missed you. So Jill Oliver.
I'm here.
Ms. Oliver, you there? Okay,
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver. Ms. Gingold, I saw you before. I know you're here.
Here.
David Boulay, I saw that you're here.
Here.
Jessica Larkin. Ms. Larkin, are you on the line? Okay, and again, maybe she'll come back. Tori McDonald. Ms. McDonald. All right, I'll give her another shot if it's her, I assume. Ms. Crary, Inga Crary. Okay, Mr. Baumgartner, I see you on the line.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bridges, I see you as well. Ms. Bruce, I see you as well. Mr. Elliott, Richard Elliott. Okay, Mr. Doby, Kevin Doby.
President.
Is that you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you're the me. Okay. Your audio quality isn't great, but I see you and I hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nuruddin, I see you. Let me see, Mr. Washington. Arthur Washington. I'm going to put a question mark there. Adam Minzer, or no, I'm sorry, that's wrong. I apologize. Let's see who else I have. Kim Perry. Ms. Perry? And Mr. Suhar, I see you as well.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. For folks who are in opposition or who are not part of the applicant's team but are speaking in support or have no position, did I miss anybody? If you're with the applicant's team, don't worry about it. But did I miss anybody who's not part of the applicant's team and wishes to speak in support, opposition, or no position? Okay, and again, if as we get to it, if I miss somebody, feel free to pop on and we'll make sense of it. Make sure you've signed up. So with that,
Chair
in
Shapiro,
terms of,
this is
yeah,
Mike Bridges. Can I ask a favor? I am out of the country and need to catch a flight. Is there any way I could speak first, if possible?
Bridges, we'll have you go first. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So the way I'm going to do this is individuals have up to 3 minutes to speak. Organizations, if you're representing an organization, you have up to 5 minutes to speak. I don't believe the opposition, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe the opposition is organized in such a way where there is a party who is representing the majority of folks in opposition. Is there? So then we'll work it this way. Mr. Suhar, I'm sorry. You had something to say?
No, I did not. I'm sorry. I'll silence I thought it was.
No worries. No worries. So then we'll take it this way. And if it's your turn to speak, if for some reason you feel like you need a little bit more time and we're working within the parameters that are set for us by how much time the applicant took, we'll have some flexibility around this, but the assumption will be up to 3 minutes for individuals, up to 5 minutes if you represent an organization, okay? And we will start with Mr. Bridges. Mr. Bridges, you have up to 3 minutes. You can introduce yourself for the record and the floor is yours.
Good morning, Chair and Planning Board. This is Mike Bridges. I'm a resident of Bowie. I'm testifying to establish my opposition to DSP 22028 on the grounds that it's based on an illegal zoning text amendment, CB 50/2021, that violates the uniformity requirements of Land Use Article Section 22-201B2I. Specifically, the ZTA granted a special high-density favor to a property in the IRE zone while denying that same benefit to other IRE zone property owners without that benefit being based on any public policy served. An examination of CB 50/2021 reveals no articulation of a public policy served. The Planning Board has the authority to reject a DSP as long as the reasons for that rejection are neither arbitrary nor capricious. The Maryland Court of Special Appeals has ruled on a similar matter involving Freeway Airports ESA REG-0472-2021. And this new case law issued on June 29, 2022 supports a finding of fact that CB 50/2021 is indeed illegal. I ask that the Planning Board consult their legal counsel, review the evidence, including the Court of Special Appeals ruling, and also review the text of CB 50/2021 and determine independently whether you all agree that CB 50/2021 violates the uniformity rule and therefore constitutes a reasonable, non-arbitrary, and non-capricious rationale for rejecting DSP 22028. Notwithstanding the money spent by the developer thus far, the project is not vested according to existing case law because there are no footings in the ground. The planning board should not be allowing developments that rest on an illegal foundation. I also feel that the rejection of DSP 22028 should not be allowed because of the violation of Plan 2035 growth goals. If you look at both the 2019 5-year evaluation and the review of growth policies presented to the County Council on January 10th, 2023, it indicates that the county continues to veer off course with regards to achieving its Plan 2035 growth goals, specifically as it relates to the established communities growth policy areas and the regional transit district growth policy areas. Basically, the units went from a percentage of 46 to 49% in the EC area when the goal is 20%, which is the wrong direction, accelerating in the wrong direction. And the RTD growth distribution in units went down from 25% to 23% when the 2035 goal is 50%.
Wrap up, please.
Okay, will do. So that's in the wrong direction. So basically, the development of the PROS DSP 22028 is in the EC growth area and not context sensitive infill, and it further exacerbates the undesired accelerating growth relative to the RTD areas and should therefore be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. And let me say, your piece around the legality of this, we're going to hear, I know we're going to hear a lot of that from folks in the community. After we go through this process, after we hear from folks in the community, Mr. Warner, who's our principal counsel, I'm going to ask you to weigh in as well, and perhaps staff will have further comments on this as well, just to lay out your position. You've communicated clearly to us why you all have communicated us why you feel that this is the applicant is within their rights to proceed as they have laid out. But we'll want to hear from that because we're going to hear lots of folks in the community have concerns about that. So Mr. Warner, Mr. Hunt, you may want to prepare yourselves for that. And Mr. Bridges, thank you very much for taking the time and have a safe flight.
Thank you.
Okay, we will go on to, I'll take it from the top of my list. We'll start with Ms. Oliver, Jill Oliver, Fairwood Community Association resident. Ms. Oliver, introduce yourself for the record, and you have up to 5 minutes, Ms. Oliver, I'm sorry, and the floor is yours.
I am not going to take 5 minutes. I'll speak as a resident because Mr. Baumgarten will speak for the association. Right. Okay.
We'll bump you down to 3 minutes, Ms. Oliver, but take it away. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chair Shapiro and Planning Board members. For the record, my name is Jill Oliver, and I am the president of the Fairwood Community Association, which represents almost 2,000 homes. I'm speaking specifically on my own behalf and also on the behalf of many residents who could not be here today. And I want to register opposition to DSP 2020-22028 for the same reasons stated by Mr. Michael Bridges, who just spoke. Homeownership was stated earlier is important, but it's important if it's done the right way. Like many other communities, Fairwood has been victimized by the zoning text amendment process that allowed this developer and others to move forward in the development process without engaging Fairwood residents. Fairwood residents have had to continuously spend significant time and resources to stop the assault on our community. The use of text amendments usurps the rights of residents and will always act to silence community voices. This is not the right way to do development and should not be supported because of the legal issues that are involved and the fact that the community has not been brought into the fold. The applicant committed to Fairwood community residents that our concerns would be addressed, but they weren't. And I agree with what has been stated by the commissioners, that the design is terrible and should not be allowed to move forward. And this application should not be allowed to move forward. You know why this design is terrible? Because there should be no townhouses there. The zoning, original zoning was for single family and or commercial development. And that is what that plot of land was supposed to be for that type of development. And the current zoning has now gone back to the original zoning, noting that this particular plot of land is really not consistent with townhouses are not consistent with this type of land mass and for this type of development. So, in the end, we would encourage the developer to work with the community to get to a design that supports and complements the surrounding community. And with that, I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver. Much appreciated. Ms. Oliver, question for you. You said Mr. Baumgartner is actually representing you and other of the folks in opposition?
He is representing Fairwood Community Association, so he should have 5 minutes.
Excellent, no problem at all. Do you care where he goes in the order? I'll leave it to you to determine it. Do you want him to go last? Do you want him to go next? What's going to be helpful for you?
Derek, it's up to you. Please let me know what your preference is.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver. Mr. Chairman, my argument is legal only. I would certainly leave it up to the chairman to determine whether or not that's best to go last, or if the chair and the board would like to hear a legal argument with regard to the applicability of the prior zoning ordinance.
So let's have you go last, because I know that we're going to have our team pick this issue up at the end too, and I think it'll keep it fresh in our minds as we hear it, because I know this is a significant issue for you all. So thank you. Thank you again, Ms. Oliver. So go to the next person on our list, and then we have Janet Gingold. Ms. Gingold, you'll have up to 5 minutes representing the Sierra Club, and if you can introduce yourself, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I'm Janet Gingold. I live in Kettering, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the Prince George's County Sierra Club. We seriously need to change how we decide what to build, where, and how. Townhouse developments belong in towns where people can easily walk to common destinations. This is not such a place. This development is not consistent with Plan 2035, which calls for focusing development near transit and in designated activity centers. This place is nowhere near a metro station. It's not within a designated activity center. It will put 200 new households where they will be dependent on cars to get where they need to go. The fact that it can be developed as MXT based on a footnote in an outdated zoning ordinance doesn't mean that it should. It's not pedestrian friendly or bike friendly. How will residents walk or bike safely to the Safeway or to work across 450? It's just, that's nowhere in there that it's bike or pedestrian friendly. There's a new bill, CB 52, 2023, currently before the County Council, which would limit new townhouse developments like this to properties that are within specified regional transit centers, local transit centers, and local centers designated within the current general plan, within council government designated activity centers or designated transit-oriented or revitalization areas. I refer you to the whereas clauses of that bill for the rationale for not building new developments like this outside the designated activity centers. For thriving communities today and into the future, evaluation of new development should include potential climate impacts and plans related to energy use, especially for higher density developments. Anyone who moves into brand new housing deserves to be able to trust that their new home meets building standards for the future, including energy performance standards. Sneaking under the wire to avoid compliance with new requirements is not in the best interest of future residents. If there is uncertainty about what new building energy performance standards will apply, Approval should be deferred now so that we can get it right for the future. It's abundantly clear that future developments should be all electric and powered by renewable energy with battery storage for resilience. Where will the electric power come from? Where are the solar panels? Where are the charging stations? Where do the battery storage units go? Will this community be connected with its own microgrid? Where is the neighborhood resilience hub? Maybe these elements of infrastructure are not required by current code, but they're essential for responsible development as we look toward the next half century. Please do not authorize building this development that will dig us deeper into our dependence on fossil fuels and automobiles with high per capita vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions. Use the authority you have to ensure that what is built on this property does not just compound the problems of our dependence on fossil fuels, but provides part of the solution going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kingold. Next, we have David Boulay.
Yes, hello, my name is David Boulay. Thank you, Chair and Planning Board. I am speaking as a resident of the Fairwood community and also a member of the Fairwood Development Committee. My conversation is not going to be legal at all. It's going to be about aesthetics, about what it really means to be context sensitive. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to call your bank to dispute something, and to better serve you, we have a new phone system, and you end up pressing buttons for an hour and can never get through to an agent. And you think of the irony and the mistruth behind that better serve you comment. That's what this context sensitivity is all about in this presentation from Mr. Tedesco. I think context means, what are the adjacent communities doing? What are the neighboring plots that are connected to this community doing? And they're all single family homes. Diagonally across the street, to the left and the right. Sure, there's commercial across the street. That's commercial. That's not residential. And even by the Bell Station, more residential. You have to go down the street to find townhomes. And if we're going to talk about left behind, another one of these better serve you quotes, those are older townhomes that were built before the single family residences. So if you want to keep up with the times, wouldn't you also be interested in following the single family residence wave? So, you know, I go through my community, and what makes Fairwood special is the aesthetics, the brick homes, the very focused architecture on colonial and federal, motifs. If we were being context sensitive and using the Fairwood name on our sign, wouldn't we have hired an architect to design buildings that keep in harmony? No. These buildings look like they belong by a New Carrollton metro station. Sure, they're hip and they're cool and maybe they're slick looking, but that's not this community. That's done by the Home Depot. And I don't say that with, oh, go down to the Home Depot and find architecture, build it here and call it context sensitive, because that was mentioned too. Home Depot's down the street. You want to build a home that looks like it belongs by Home Depot? Go build it there. So I'm really bothered by the mischaracterization of terms used to kind of give nice flavors to things, as though someone is doing us a favor by building townhomes here. Far from it. And even the phrase of transition from the Artura roadways with more dense, smaller townhomes to more larger homes. Who needs a transition? There's nothing that says, oh, an Artura roadway requires a highly dense home so you can then feather out to less dense homes, build them all less dense. When we asked this question in the meeting where Mr. Tedesco joined the other night with our development committee, that question was posed. Couldn't you have all larger townhomes? And the answer was no, there's an economic component, which is really another phrase from the telephone company, which is code for we wouldn't make as much profit doing that. So rather than a profit-motivated development exercise here, I would rather have something on this land that truly serves the community and improves our home values and our quality of life. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Boulay. Appreciate it. Next, we have Jessica Larkin. I was looking for you before. I didn't hear from you, Ms. Larkin. Are you on the line? No. Next, similarly, Tori McDonald. Is there Tori McDonald on the line? Do we have Inga Prairie on the line? Okay, next I'll go to Miss Denise Bruce. I did see you. I know you are here. Miss Bruce, you can introduce yourself. There you are, and the floor is yours. You have up to 3 minutes to speak. Take it away.
Yeah.
We can hear you now, Miss Bruce. Miss Bruce, we can't hear you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to say, because I know you've been waiting, but we can't hear you.
Bruce,
It's not working.
I am a resident.
Ms. Bruce?
I'm also on the development committee.
Ms. Bruce, hold on one sec. We're not hearing you very well, and I want to make sure we can hear you, okay?
Can you hear me?
Not very well. We're gonna get to you. Here's what I'm gonna ask you to do. I think your best bet would be to restart your computer and re-enter, okay? Can you, maybe if you just reboot, we will get you, we won't lose you, okay? But so drop off, reboot, and come back.
I don't know why you can't hear
me. Back to Ms. Bruce. Okay. We'll come back to Ms. Bruce. Next, we have Mr. Richard Elliott. Mr. Elliott, are you on the line? No, Mr. Elliott? Okay, Mr. Dobie, Kevin Dobie.
Can you hear me? Is my audio a little bit better?
We can hear you, but it's very muddled, your sound.
Does this improve as a audio? Can you hear me a little bit better now?
It's really hard, Mr. Dobie. Hey, here's a suggestion, Mr. Dobie. We can see you. What if you call in rather than use your computer? Right? You have the call-in number?
Yes, sir. I've got it right here. I'll just call in right now.
So mute this and then call in. Excellent. Is it working, Mr. Dobie?
Yes.
Say something now on your phone.
I'm in.
Hey, there's perfect. Sound quality is great. We can see you and hear you, Mr. Dobie. The floor is yours. You have up to 3 minutes. If you could introduce yourself for the record and take it away.
Okay, my name is Kevin Dope. There's a little bit of a reverb. Okay, so my name is Kevin Dobie. I'm a resident of Glen Arden. This isn't my first detailed site planning hearing, so it's a little too familiar for me. But I am officially here to oppose DSP 22-028 for Fairwood Square. Truth be told, I know I only have 3 minutes, so my issue is with the amount of water that will be usurped by the creation of this development. Globally, we're facing a water crisis. This is something that we're seeing devastating effects of in Taiwan. We're seeing it in California. And the problem is just getting closer and closer. But I wanted to bring something to you all's attention, because there seems to be a bit of an attitude with a lot of developers that this is the only development that is being built or is in the works. And so the effects on the environment will be minimum. But I'd like to bring to you all's attention Senate Bill 516 that sits on the governor's desk as we speak. And this relates to cannabis licensing. Just hang in there with me. In the coming years, we are to expect an influx of dispensaries within the state of Maryland. I'll bring this home for you all. We are to expect 200 new dispensaries in the state of Maryland, 100 new growers within the state. Now, this will use an unprecedented amount of water. And it could eventually lead us to circumstances similar to what's being faced in Colorado with extreme drought. Now, back to the design of the project, not only does 200 or the density of the project usurp a lot of water, but it doesn't allow anywhere for water to go once it falls. There are no permeable surfaces, and the green space looks like it will just be covered with turf and non-native trees, which always presents a problem. I'll wrap everything up by saying I'm tired of the ticky-tacky designs that keep being pushed into Prince George's County. We deserve a lot better. I am so thankful for Mr. Dorner's objections. I'm glad to see that people are paying attention. And Chairman Shapiro, I'm also happy that you are chiming in on this because we are tired of this poor design. And I'd like to say in closing, Mr. Tedesco brings up that none of the issues or fears that we had regarding the Fairwood development would ever come to fruition. But I'd like to turn his attention to the year 2019, when a young man, I believe by the age of 14, Jamal Kashid, was killed in an accident off of Church Road. The issues that we are bringing up are real issues. There are too many problems to address at the moment, but right now the design is just tacky and it doesn't prepare us for the global crisis that we're all facing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dovey. Next, we'll have Ms. Nurdine.
Okay, can you hear
And then
me?
Ms. Bruce, we can hear you perfectly. And then Ms. Bruce will get to you after Ms. Nurdine.
Okay, for the record, my name is Ms. Terry Nuruddin, and I'm speaking on behalf of my family. Our primary resources for these notes was the staff notes from the commission, the Prince George's County Climate Action Strategies, and select Bowie documents. We want Bowie and the Prince George's County to be responsible to current and future residents, and that profit motive and increased taxes are not the only incentives for this development. We want public officials to look out for us and safeguard our homes, mortgages, community sustainability, livelihood, as well as our economic well-being. These efforts must start with planting new communities that can financially survive in the future. We believe zoning codes, building codes, and the development review process need to support climate-ready buildings. To that extent, the regulation of land use needs to be strongly correlated to smart growth, natural resource conservation, and green.
Ms. Nurdine, we lost you.
Infrastructure. As I'm,
Ms. Nurdine, we've lost you. You froze. Why don't you turn off your mic, turn off your camera?
And Frank,
Ms. Nurdine, turn off your camera.
It's like she did not hear you.
We will come back to Ms. Nurdine. Okay, we'll come back to Ms. Nordine. Ms. Bruce, let's see if we get lucky with you.
Good afternoon. Denise Bruce, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you
Yeah.
fine, and we can see you fine.
Great,
There's the
great.
floor is
I'm a-
yours. If you have we're gonna reset the clock for you. You'll have up to 3 minutes to speak. If you can introduce yourself for the record and take it away.
Thank you. I'm Denise Bruce. I'm a resident of the Fairwood community, and I'm specifically in the Prospect section, which butts right directly behind this proposed development. I oppose DSP 22028 and align myself with the comments of my neighbors who have expressed similar opposition. I also feel that there needs to be a more in-depth traffic study done with the new development that's underway with the senior community on Enterprise Road. The traffic at 450 and Enterprise is already extremely problematic. I can only imagine what is going to happen to the traffic when you have another 200 to 400 people who decide they want to make a left turn on 450 and they're unable to. So they'll go across all the lanes to get to the light and make a U-turn. I just feel the density proposed is way too high for that area. And I also am very concerned about the environmental study. I feel that another more in-depth study needs to be conducted. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Bruce. Appreciate it. And I'm glad we could work out the technology and hear what you had to say.
Yes, thank you.
So next we'll go to back to Ms. Nordine. Mr. Nordine, can you hear us? Can you hear me okay? You're on mute if you can hear us. Take yourself off mute. Can't hear you. Still on mute. Oh, what? Try now. No.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yes. Take your microphone, take your camera off though. Just go audio. Maybe that'll work better. All right, we're going to keep going and we'll come back to Ms. Nordine again.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Now we can hear you fine.
Hi.
All right, take it away. We're going to start. We're going to start your clock over again. Yep, Ms. Nordine, we're going to start the clock over again. And
okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I'll just say that. Okay, great. So sorry, everybody. My family did research based on your notes and the climate action strategies, and I'll just fall into the last part in that what Frank's nursery represented in terms of small and rural, and with the impact of the climate change, the change in temperatures, and the necessity of planned communities in terms of the financial hardship and responsibility. That is why we were recommending that all the streets be public, that the dog park and the recreational facilities be public and managed by Bowie or the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning, that the housing be reduced to 125 or no more than 150, but more importantly, that the green space woodlands be increased, and that as a marker, the Frank's Nursery concepts embracing gardening, exerscaping, environmentally friendly terrains, and flood prevention strategies by limiting impervious surfaces, and that you implement logistical strategies that reduce dangerous traffic patterns and ensure safe patterns for school buses and commuters within the community. In closing, my family believes that the continuing aftermath of COVID has a lasting impact on our lives, especially our youth and their families, and should inspire us to be better community planners and stewards. And I think this needs to start now, because the financial hardship of managing those recreation facilities will manifest itself. And that community, as I saw from the plans today, is very poorly situated to engage a sense of spirit within the community. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Ms. Nordine. I'm glad we got to hear from you. Glad you worked through the technology and you were patient with us. I appreciate that. I think we have 5 or 6 people who did not come on the line. So besides Mr. Baumgartner, am I missing anybody? Is there anyone else who has signed up who wishes to speak besides Ms. Baumgartner, Mr. Baumgartner?
Yeah,
Oh, Mr. Suhar, I apologize. I so apologize, Mr. Suhar. I missed your list. So take it away. The floor is yours. And you are representing
two community associations, Mr. Chairman, the Wingate Homeowners Association and also Gabriel's Run Homeowners Association.
Okay, we'll give you 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon now, since it is just afternoon. Chairman Shapiro and the Planning Board, thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak on behalf of my clients. I'm with the firm of Nagel and Zahler. I am an attorney and represent, again, Wingate Homeowners Association and Gabriel's Run Homeowners Association. Both associations which are in the vicinity of the applicant's property, they oppose the application for several reasons. And so in their application, the applicant for a detailed site plan, the applicant claimed that Georges County Planning Board, its findings of the information presented within CB 50 2021, which was adopted by the District Council on November 16th, 2021. The applicant claims that this bill allowed townhomes and commercial uses that are generally permitted in the mixed use transportation oriented zone MXT. That was true. However, on January 17th, 2023, as the Planning Board knows, the District Council adopted CB 12 2023, which repealed CB 50 2021. It's important to note that date because the planning staff, as they stated at the beginning of today's meeting, noted that the application for DSP was accepted on the day after, which was January 18th, 2023. So it's my opinion and our position that the application for DSP the applicant is no longer entitled to the MXT zone. They cannot build townhomes on this property anymore. The density is too great, and the zoning does not no longer allows for the townhome development on this property. And so the preliminary plan of subdivision that was approved in this case was not a development application, and therefore the applicant in this case would not be able to proceed with their planned townhomes in the RE zone. Again, CB 50, which allowed the higher density townhomes, was repealed by CB 12 2023. Now, based on this, the applicant, in my opinion, my humble opinion, they're in crisis mode now. They're trying to figure out a way to try and convince you that somehow that they don't fall under this, that the CB 1223 2023 does not apply to them. And so they've tried to get creative in their arguments, and pursuant to a March 21st, 2023 letter, they claim that that the DSP was filed under section 27-1704 pursuant to a grandfathered preliminary plan of subdivision and it was not, it was not filed under section 27-1900. They're relying upon this argument. It all falls under which section of the code applies. And, but it's our position, just one moment, that that because they filed their application after the April 1st cutoff, the deadline in April 1st, that they can no longer rely upon that prior zoning ordinance. I see that I'm running out of time, but I also, notwithstanding the arguments that it's illegal, they also are attempting to, and if the planning board does not agree with that, and it still allows the townhomes, the applicants attempt here to maximize the density on this property. It's atrocious. The townhomes that are on an adjacent lot in Fairwood are much larger townhomes than what they proposed, and they're proposing over 100 townhomes to be developed with 1,700 square feet. That's ridiculous. And both of my clients are very opposed to this extremely dense proposal. And I'm glad to see that planning board members are saying that it's too dense, and they're having a problem with the park, I guess, that was located in the middle of roadways. It's unsafe. So again, my client, I submitted a letter dated.
We have your written testimony as well, Mr. Suha.
You have the written testimony, okay, March 20th. Thank you very much for allowing me to be heard. Is my time up?
Yes.
It is, okay. I have much more to say, but I appreciate, if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Suhar. I appreciate it. Before we get to Mr. Baumgartner, I just want to make sure I've exhausted the opportunity for other folks to speak. I'm going to run through it one more time. Kim Perry, Arthur Washington, Richard Elliott, Inga Crary, Tori McDonald, Jessica Larkin. Okay. With that, Mr. Baumgartner, I will turn it over to you. You have up to 5 minutes for your presentation, and introduce yourself for the record, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, my name is Derek Baumgartner from the law firm of Whiteford, Taylor and Preston. I'm out of town this week and appearing before you from our satellite office. I would ordinarily be wearing a suit and tie when I would be before you. I do apologize for that. This is the best shirt that I have with me at the moment. I'll be very brief. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Baumgartner, I'm not even wearing a tie myself, so you're fine.
Understood, sir. Thank you. I will be brief. I did submit a letter into the record on Tuesday morning summarizing our argument. I am here on behalf of the Fairwood Community Association to present a legal argument with regard to the applicability of the prior zoning ordinance versus the current zoning and subdivision regulations. To be brief, as this board is very well aware, there are essentially two paths in the current subdivision regulations and the current zoning ordinance, which are generally referred to as the transitional rules or the transition rules. They are sections 24/1700, 24/1900, and then under the zoning regulations 27/1700, and corresponding section 27/1900. The preliminary plan of subdivision was approved and adopted by this board under section 24/1900. The applicant here, in our opinion, is essentially trying to bootstrap those two transitional sections to be read in common when our position is that they are to be read separately. The 1700 sections, I will call them, are a transitional rule which is very common and occurs in many different jurisdictions where you have development approvals, permit approvals that precede the adoption of a new ordinance, but are not fully entitled. They're not fully through that development process. Certainly, those folks should be entitled to complete the development process under the law and the regulations in which they had applied. So the section 1700, both under the subdivision regulations and under the zoning ordinance, it's our position apply to projects that received development approvals prior to April 1st, 2022. This particular application does not meet that requirement. They simply don't meet that timeline. All approvals for the preliminary plan, stormwater concept, all occurred several months after April 1st, 2022. Then we turn to sections 24, 1900 and 27, 1900. This is a separate kind of pathway that the district council found was appropriate and enacted into law to allow developments to what I call have a choose your law preference. Are we going to be developed under the prior zoning regulations or the current zoning regulations? As my colleague stated earlier, and I agree with the position of the neighboring associations, in that design, there is a provision which is 271903F, which the district council enacted that essentially pulled back zoning text amendments that the district council had identified as being problematic. It's the Fairwood Community Decisions Association's position that that provision bars application of that of CB 50/2021, which is the provision that allows townhouse development on this site. If the planning board agrees, that would essentially remove the ability to place townhouses on this property. I am running out of time. I will mention two other items quickly. Number one, this concept of grandfathering. Grandfathering is not new. This board is very well aware of how grandfathering works. However, grandfathering generally applies when you are taking an approval of a use or regulation under a prior law or zoning ordinance, and you're allowing it to continue under a present zoning or subdivision regulation or law because it was already there, essentially, or there's some other provision that keeps it alive. Under this particular application, we're not grandfathering. If you accept the applicant's argument that it's a grandfathering provision, then they should be under the current zoning regulations and not under the prior zoning regulations. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, commenting on Commissioner or Mr. Dorner's comments, as well as your own, sir, and Mr. Geraldo's comments. Front-loading garages, rear-loading garages, the location of the recreational facilities, these are all designed to maximize density. And that's exactly what has been planned. And that's what's before you. That is certainly a purposeful plan. That's not to necessarily criticize that, but that's certainly the purpose of having that particular design. With that, I will conclude my comments unless there's any questions from the chairman, members, or the law department. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Baumgartner. I appreciate your time, your patience, and your remarks. Commissioners, I'm going to turn, I want to see if there's any questions for any of the folks who's testified. If not, I'm going to turn to Mr. Tedesco for the opportunity for rebuttal and then close. And then we'll take up our process. I'm wondering whether we should hear from Mr. Warner before we hear from Mr. Tedesco. let's just follow the process. So we'll turn to Mr. Tedesco for rebuttal and then close, and then we'll turn to our staff, Mr. Warner and others. So Mr. Tedesco, take it away. The floor is yours for any rebuttal that you have, and then any final closing arguments.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the planning board, thank you for your indulgence and your patience in this case. And thank you to all the citizens and my brethren of the bar for presenting their arguments here this morning / afternoon. We appreciate it. While I respect everything that I heard, I obviously disagree with many of it. And I will go through that very briefly. There's a lot to undress there, but a lot of it was mentioned in my opening arguments with respect to the opposition's basis in this case. With that being said, I do want to respectfully remind the planning board, you've heard a lot about density. There have been some questions about it. There's been some statements about it, but this board has already approved 200 single-family attached lots for this project. That preliminary plan was approved in October. All the necessary adequate public facilities, including transportation, were all previously determined to be met and found. That being said, I think the record bears repeating that all the studied intersections in this case, pursuant to the certificate of adequacy, currently operate at levels of service A. And the reason for that is because these roads at arterial classifications are fully built out. We often, and I was at a community meeting last night, we often hear about these roads need to be in place before this development occurs. This is what exactly is occurring in this case. The roads and the infrastructure is in place to support this development, as well as the surrounding development. So the traffic issue is just simply a red herring. There's already been findings of determination that were made. I meant to correct one thing Mr. Shelley indicated regarding the access points. There are 2 proposed access points on Annapolis Road, Maryland 450. One is a right-in, right-out. The other one, Mr. Shelley had represented as a full access movement, which I think may have caused a little bit of confusion. That second access point, which is to the north, which is the main access point to the project, is a right-in, right-out, and a left-in. It is not a left-out. So the movements are somewhat restricted for safety reasons, and that's pursuant to the State Highway Administration. So there's one right-in, right-out, and then there's a separate right-in, right-out with a left-in, meaning cars traveling west on Maryland 450 can turn left into the site, but cars cannot turn left out of the site. So I just wanted to clarify that for the record. We heard a lot about CB50, Mr. Bridges, Mr. Suhar, Mr. Bumgarner with respect to the effects of CB50, its illegality, or their position that it is, and the effects of CB12. I did go through that in great detail in my opening. I just want to state for the record with respect to Mr. Bridges' argument with respect to public purpose or policy. CB50 identifies locations for the provisions of housing within the county, which is in line with the general purposes of the zoning ordinance. Therefore, the enactment of that law is consistent with a defined public policy set forth in the general purposes of the prior zoning ordinance. Also, general plan conformity is not a requirement of this detailed site plan. That being said, you all did find conformity at the time of preliminary plan. But even if it was, established communities anticipate growth. And this project does not violate the growth limitations set forth for established communities. The argument that concentrations need to be in town centers is relevant, since the density being proposed for this project no way exceeds the growth density set forth in the established communities. Ms. Gingle testified with respect to townhomes should be located in towns within walking distance for commercial retail. That's precisely why the applicant is proposing in the master plan of transportation, as well as the master plan for the Bowie vicinity, propose a 10-foot wide shared hiker biker trail along the frontages of these right-of-ways. Pedestrians will be able to access that shared hiker biker trail and walk to the existing or surrounding commercial retail safely along existing existing sidewalks. that's again, context sensitivity as far as having this types of density and this type of development. Townhomes, she said it herself, should be in locations where it's walkable. This is walkable. We're proposing a 10-foot wide shared hiker-biker trail along the frontage to encourage that and provide pedestrian connectivity to the adjacent commercial shopping center, which were not designed and developed to serve only Fairwood. We do believe, notwithstanding some of the comments with respect to context sensitivity, that this is exactly that. Context sensitivity doesn't necessarily mean everything looks exactly the same. Context sensitivity means, are the land uses compatible with each other given the surrounding environment? And as I mentioned, and as you can see from this image on your screen, Fairwood is 1,799 units, hundreds of attached product and multifamily products, small lot single family residents at the entrance. If you were to turn into the Fairwood community from Maryland 450, the first thing that you see is the shopping center. The next thing you see are attached products. So how anyone could argue that this is not in keeping with that and not being context sensitive, just simply is ignoring the reality. It just simply doesn't want townhomes on this property, which you're entitled to that opinion. We're not suggesting that you're not, but as long as the laws and the regulations are being followed, this board has a legal obligation to administer them. And there is no legal basis, which I'll turn to in a minute, for this detailed site plan to be denied. Turning to Mr. Suhar and Mr. Bumgarner's arguments, first, let me be abundantly clear. Mr. Suhar, both in his written testimony and written arguments as well as his oral arguments here today, said repeatedly that CB12 repeals CB50 2021. CB12 2023 does not in any way repeal CB50 2021. In fact, the word repeal is not even in CB12 2023. CB12 2023 only limited the ability for somebody to utilize certain ordinance provisions in the prior zoning ordinance pursuant to section 27-1900. It did not repeal it. That carries into Mr. Bumgarner's argument with respect to, he wants this board, and I know why he does, but he wants this board to not follow long-established statutory construction rules and read these sections separately. We all know that we must read all the sections of the ordinance together so as not to render any one section a nullity. Mr. Bumgarner wants you to do exactly that. He wants you to read 24-1900, 24-1700 separately, and he wants you to read 27-1900 and 27-1700 sections separately. That would render one a nullity, which is a violation of statutory construction. Mr. Suhar made a comment that we are scrambling and in crisis mode. He could be further from the truth. We are not. We are following the law as the district council adopted it when they adopted the new zoning ordinance, which implemented through the CMA. And the plain reading of the statute is quite clear. Although I said it before, I'll say it again. Section 24-1903 provides, and I quote, again, the preliminary plan was filed under 24-1900, but it provides, the 1903B provides that once approved, meaning once the preliminary plan of subdivision that's been filed under the 1900 provisions is approved, development applications that utilized the prior subdivision regulations shall be considered, quote, grandfathered, close quote, and subject to the provisions set forth in section 24-1704. Now, Mr. Bumgarner wants you to stop your analysis there, but the code directs you to 24-1704. So let's turn to 27-1704B. It says, quote, until and unless the period of time under which the subdivision approval remains valid expires. Our preliminary plan was approved in October of 2022. It's valid until 2024. The project may proceed to the next steps in the approval process, including any zoning steps that may be necessary, and continue to be reviewed and decided under the subdivision regulations and zoning ordinance in effect immediately prior to the effective date of the new county subdivision regulations and zoning ordinance. Thus, when you read those sections together, which you are required to do, the preliminary plan is grandfathered, as that term is used in section 27-1704, excuse me, in 1903B, and it triggers the next steps in the approval process pursuant to Part 27 of the code, which triggers the 27-1704 provisions. That's precisely in the proper legal analysis that your staff has made. I presume your counsel will opine on it as well, why CB 12/2023 does not apply or render CB 50 a nullity in this case. And you have the full authority to review this application as presented. In closing, and to further address Commissioner Dorner and Mr. Chairman's comments with respect to that one recreational amenity, the applicant is willing to proffer in response to that a handful of things. One, and we would accept conditions to this effect. One, elevating the trigger for the amenity, including the dog park, to be done at the 50th building permit, as opposed to, I think it was the 120th or somewhere north of 100. Move that up significantly into the development process at the 50th permit. Two, the alley that Commissioner Dorner was referencing that had adjacent, I think, 8 parking spaces that cut off the other green element. The applicant and I think staff had a chance to review this as well, so I'll defer to Mr. Hunt on that, but we would accept a condition to remove that portion of the alley to connect those 2 green areas and remove those 8 parking spaces, significantly enlarging that amenity space and green area in that location, and providing, to Commissioner Dorner's point, in response to that, I think a better, safer scenario, although I'm not conceding that the prior one was unsafe, but certainly clearly from the comments, there was the ability to make those modifications at the time of certification that we think are very responsive in addressing the concerns that were raised. So with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the board and members of the community, I thank everybody for their time and their passion in this case. I think staff's recommendations, in addition to the proffers that were just made as conditioned, warrant approval of this application, and we would respectfully request that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tedesco. Okay, we have heard from the applicant on rebuttal and close. Commissioners, it is for us to, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to hear from Mr. Warner first on the legality.
Mr. Chairman, one question, please, before we leave Mr. Tedesco, and that is as it relates to charging stations, Mr. Tedesco. I know one of the citizens did testify about charging state, and I'm curious, especially in light of the EPA's new proposed rules about 2/3 of vehicles being all electric by 2032. Will there be charging stations on the property, or at least the infrastructure in place for that?
So, currently all the homes are adaptable for chargers in the garages. All these homes will have are proposed to have garages, obviously. So individualized charging availability for the homes will be there, as it is for all of us in our homes today. As far as actually charging areas, we don't have any proposed. It may be more appropriate for those to be considered and designed at the time of the detailed site plan for the commercial component of that, to provide areas for charging stations. But internally to the site, other than the availability for chargers within the homes themselves, I think the next best area would be part of that commercial component in the future.
Okay, thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions for the applicant after his close? Mr. Warner, Mr. Hunt, you talk a little bit about, I'm sorry, Commissioner Dorner, yeah.
Yeah, so on the proffers and closing down that alleyway, one of the other things that Mr. Tedesco had mentioned earlier was potentially various crosswalks in that area, because I think that largely alleviates one of my main concerns in terms of this being an island. But then there's still kind of like to the bottom and sort of the corner of it, as you're going through the townhomes there's sidewalks that are on opposite sides of the intersections that would still remain, but there's no crosswalks in that visual aid. So I wanted to find specifically where you would do kind of raised crosswalks that would aid pedestrian safety and getting from areas that aren't necessarily fully connected to the green area.
No.
So yes, in this image, I guess it's inverted. It's upside down, right, from where the map would be. But where that tree is up at the very top, and then to the kind of the left where that tree kind of is that you can't really see the sidewalk extending out. Those are the connections that are missing, at least right now.
Yes, and I think, thank you for putting this image back up. So the proffer would be, so if you're looking at your screen, the alley to the right side of the recreational amenity, and there's, I believe, 8 parking spaces there, right where the cursor is. Well, yeah, in that area, that would become a green, and those parking spaces in that alley would become a green, and that would be opened up. In addition, we would proffer raised crosswalks to connect the site sidewalks to the recreational facilities. And I believe, I don't want to speak for Mr. Hunt, but I believe they've been working on conditions to that effect, which the applicant would agree to. So I think with the raised crosswalks, providing the connectivity as well as the removal of that alley and those 8 parking spaces, will fully address the issues that you raised.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. No other questions, Mr. Warner. Let me turn it over to you.
Question.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Giraldo, yes.
No, that's fine. I'm trying to envision. I'm more of a person that has to see things. So you're going to reduce or eliminate the parking, and I'm looking at it through my screen and be on the right side. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Tedesco?
Commissioner Dorado, that's correct. So if you see there's 2 white cars, a dark color car, another white car, those spaces would be removed. That would be all made, green area. And then all the asphalt alley that extends to the right of the screen, connecting where the yellow orange tree would be, that would be all one connected green area, increasing the size of that, because if off the screen of this, there's additional green open space further to the right that extends to another part of the development. So you would have one contiguous green in that capacity. So Commissioner Dorner's comments were, I think it gets a little confusing because the plans kind of get turned around. But if you zoom in, if somebody could zoom into the central area, you could see it much better. So you see where the yellow oval is in the center of your screen?
Yes.
Right there. So if it's the 8 parking spaces to the left of that, and then that alley to the left. Go up, no, up, over, no, up. Yeah, you're way too far.
So in other words, all that asphalt that's displayed now will be gone.
All that, yes. I mean, we would proffer that. I think your staff has a condition that would require that to be shown at prior certification. But yes, all that asphalt to the left of that central amenity would be removed, and it would all be impervious area, green area, connecting the other green area to the right of the townhomes beyond.
Okay, thank you.
And then also, Commissioner Giraldo, just to reiterate, the dog park triggering condition was 150th permit. We would proffer to move that up to the 50th permit to address your concern.
Okay. Other questions? And under deliberation, I'm telling you, commissioners, I'm coming back to this issue around design. So we're going to be taking this up again in a few minutes because I hear you loud and clear. I have some concerns about it. But let's turn to Mr. Warner. I want to focus on this issue around the legality of this and CB 50 and the repeal or not repeal and the laws and regulations being followed. Just focus on that, and then we can make a decision around that. And then I'd like to take up the design issue if we come to some resolution around the legality issue. Okay. Mr. Warner, Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Chairman. David Warner, Principal Counsel. Both the applicant and the opponents submitted, 4 to 5 pages of legal analysis each. So I'm not going to go step by step through the legal analysis, especially since both of them have already provided their positions. I will tell you about the positions that they've given that I agree with. First off, I do agree with Mr. Tedesco that CB 12/2023 did not repeal CB 50/2021. Instead, the district council said that, except in certain cases, CB 50/2021 could not be used for processing applications. It's a little kind of an indefinite term. If you recall, CB 50/2021 is an amendment to the use table. It wasn't an amendment to the process for filing and reviewing detailed site plans. And I will also agree with Mr. Tedesco that in the transitional provisions, both in the subdivision regulations and the zoning ordinance, the language that he cites very clearly allows this application to be reviewed under the prior zoning ordinance. I agree wholeheartedly that the sections that he cites do give the planning board the authority to review this application under the prior zoning ordinance. I don't agree that it's crystal clear. And we have navigated this issue on more than one application in trying to work through our understanding of the transitional provisions, which are the 1700 provisions, and the 2-year application windows provisions of 1900. And they don't work together smoothly. And I don't believe that Mr. Suhar or Mr. Baumgartner, although I would rephrase some of the sections they quote, because I think they kind of got some of the sections wrong in their submitted materials, but I think that they make at least a facially acceptable argument that perhaps the council intended that this application was not to be reviewed under the prior zoning ordinance. I don't believe, though, that it's in any way crystal clear. And when I reviewed both arguments, I tended to think Mr. Tedesco's was the better argument. As you know, if you put 2 or more attorneys in a room, we'll probably never agree, right, on exactly what a law means. But as your counsel, I would advise this planning board that it has the authority to review this application under the prior zoning ordinance, and that it should do so, because to not do so and then have this application go to the county council and the county council to tell us we should have would be a mistake. So in this case, I think what we are doing is appropriate under the law, and it's supported by the law. And, should the county council feel like our determination of the law was incorrect, if this gets reviewed by them, they will have the opportunity to make that clear on appeal or on call-up. So I hope that sufficiently answers the legal question, but if you have any specific questions about anybody's legal opinions in the presentations, I'm happy to discuss those.
And to be clear, Mr. Warner, I mean, ultimately the decision is in the final authority of the district council. So regardless of which way we go, they'll to your point, they will tell us if they believe in their clarification, if they had a different legislative intent, they will let us know.
Correct. So when this gets appealed, if it gets appealed, their standard of review allows them to identify mistakes in the interpretation of law by us and to remand a case to us and say, no, this is what the law means. They certainly have that authority. Yep.
So commissioners, just on this issue, the legality issue, I just want to say that I'm comfortable with staff and our attorney's interpretation of this, that the applicant has the right to proceed in the way that they are laying out. But I'm curious to see if any of you are in a different place around that. But I want to take this issue up separately from any design issues. So questions, thoughts, reactions?
No, I'm comfortable with moving forward based on Council Warner's comments.
Mr. Chairman, I got disconnected for a long period of time, and that was one of my questions, but I came back just in time to hear Mr. Warner. So I'm glad that that discussion occurred because I wanted to hear his interpretations, someone on our staff's legal interpretation of how they felt about the actions in CB 12 2023. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. All right. So if there's no concerns around this, then we will park that issue. We'll assume that the applicant has the right to proceed. And so now let's take up discussion, deliberation on other issues. I mean, let me start with the design piece. And first of all, let me say, I don't want anything that I've said to be misconstrued by staff to suggest that, and Mr. Hunt, this is for you and your team. I want to be clear. I think you all are doing your job and doing it well, right? And we are within our authority to consider the design in different ways. And that's all that I think is happening. I think you all are doing your job fine. From the design piece, the piece for me that I think is missing most, and we were getting at it when we were looking at this issue that Commissioner Dorner brought up around that park and the piece in the middle. And I think that's moving in the right direction. But I think this housing product, and I don't have a problem with townhomes even in this location. For me, it's more around the design of the project. And I really would like to see some kind of a more thoughtful central park in a development of this style. I do not think, because of where this is located, I think it's very important that folks have access to those kind of amenities right there on site. So I think if we can zoom in, Kenny, on that park again, I think taking that park, and I think what's being proposed, proffered by the applicant, you got the zoom in? Here we go. What I believe is being proffered by the applicant is that park where the hand is right now, and the roadway to the sort of upper left of that will connect with that little sliver of green space up above, the triangle shape. And I think that's what they're proffering. So I think that moves this development towards having a central park, but it feels like it's pigeonholed in. And I would like them to go back to maybe not the drawing board, but go back and spend some real time thinking about how you design this in a way that it has more of a pedestrian orientation with that central focus. And I think that's worth a little bit of time. So that's the direction that I would like to go with this. Taking a little more time means that, because we're up against the statutory deadline and the action limit. So we would need the applicant to ask for some kind of a waiver. I don't think it's a long one. I mean, maybe it's 30, 45 days or something like that. But I would like to see a little bit more work go into that piece of the design. So that's my 2 cents. Let me throw that out, and I'm curious to see where you all are and where we land with this.
So I'll jump in because I was asking a lot of questions before, and I'll reiterate what you said in terms of my comments are not towards Mr. Shelley or other staff in terms of the way that they've been analyzing this, because there's no way that they're also going to interpret or know how to interpret how I'm going to react or how any of us are going to react to some of these projects. Part of this is a learning process, and it's an evolutionary learning process. As we see plans come through and we may go to conferences or read stuff online, we're going to develop our own ideas for where we think things are evolving or how they might best evolve in different ways, particularly as we're trying to fit in with the new zoning ordinance and just kind of styles of urbanism and how that's changing. and I appreciate Mr. Tedesco's proffers, because that triangle kind of area was my largest complaint. I'm not terribly thrilled with the whole design of the whole project, because it to me looks like a convoluted maze that my son would draw. And when I'm thinking of urban design, I'm thinking of like grid kind of network and facilitating kind of pedestrian safety throughout here, connectivity and stuff. And it's just like totally zigzag mess when I'm looking at this stuff. Sure, it fits a lot of townhomes in there. Don't necessarily think that it's the best way to do this, or that it's prioritizing pedestrian or connectivity in any kind of way, shape, or form, how it originally came out. I think connecting that green space, yeah, like where you can kind of see where that yellow oval is right now, in the sort of the middle of the screen, yeah, where the cursor is. To the top left of there is that asphalt area that Mr. Tedesco is proffering to connect in to the green space. And I think that starts to get at more connectivity and more safety. I'm still really concerned, though, about having townhomes back out right into the park garage kind of area there. I don't know necessarily, and one of the problems is that as you kind of go down and to the left right there, you still have an access point going out that has no sidewalks running between on the side of the townhomes, and people are pictured in the picture we had seen before walking through that area, which they will, but there's no safety metrics for them to kind of be okay as they're walking through there. And I say this because I live in townhomes, and we're tight around here. And literally last night, we just went through a discussion of taking our private streets and putting raised crosswalks and some other kind of measures in there to calm traffic, because we have people who are speeding through the alleyways. And the main concerns is a group of parents, when we're standing out there trying to catch the bus and get our kids around, that we don't want our kids getting hit. And we have less cars parked and kind of going in there, and less kind of directions and things to sort of be thinking about to keep our kids safe. And all the people in these pictures have, or not all of them, I guess most of them have kids in this picture. So to me, I think we're kind of getting closer to what I would be okay with. I'm still not totally comfortable with it, because I think it's still somewhat of a danger. What I was kind of mentally thinking about is that there's, to the left of that kind of island is a set of townhomes that kind of go up. And if those townhomes were just rotated back down, kind of spun down and rotated, and were connected more in a row, and maybe there was kind of a cut through that was like 8 feet or 10 feet between, you would have a connectivity with the townhomes, and you would all of a sudden open up that green space quite a bit more. And I would actually be, as much as it pains me to say it, I'd be more accepting of front-loading garages for those, if those were to become front-loading garages, and get rid of that interior street in there by that island and make all of that a park. I think that would be a much more compelling centralized area. But right now, the way that it is, like I appreciate Mr. Tedesco's proffers, but I still think we have a conflict in some of the design guidelines that we have to support. And when we're looking at these design guidelines, like we have to find conformance with the zoning ordinances that are mentioned in there, and it talks about parking, loading, and circulation, and it's helping get me closer to being comfortable with it, but I'm still not there. And I think it was nice to see that, but this design is just kind of a mess in how it is, and I think it's trying to get to that density that is a bit too much for my comfort zone right now, and it may only necessitate like losing three townhomes or 2 townhomes as you kind of rotate those around and put a space into there. It's going to reduce some of the parking. I, for one, would be supportive of having an amendment to not worry about the minimum parking if we get to that, or we're looking to somewhere else, because to me, pedestrian safety is more important than losing a few parking places, because I don't want anyone getting hit. And that's really my legitimate concern in this area. Because I've seen it happen. We've had a neighbor get hit in an area like this. And because of my experiences of living in very dense areas in these kinds of townhomes, it just makes me a lot more reactionary to seeing bad designs that like I just immediately kind of like curl back from, because I can just imagine very quickly and easily like how this could go wrong in a ton of different ways. So I'm not going to vote in favor of the project right now. Even though it does offer up, I think it's getting closer. I'm not convinced. I could get there with a potential like redesign to some ways of that. And it's really that central area that to me makes me most uncomfortable. That's kind
Appreciate
of
that. Thank you. And I mean, let me just join in a little bit with that, because I agree. If there was more of a central green designed into it that was pedestrian oriented, and if I look at the rest of it, I do see access points from all the sections that sort of could carry you right into that central green. And I think, that's going to be something that sort of works for me. But again, for Commissioner Giraldo, Vice Chair Bailey, Commissioner Washington, I'm curious where you are, if this matters as much to you, if you can support that direction, or, do you think that we're being bonkers around this?
No, I certainly don't. And, I personally have never lived in a townhome community, but I certainly appreciate your comments as well as Commissioner Dorner's comments, because, and quite frankly, you have raised some things that I just would never have thought about. But you have lived experiences in that regard. So I appreciate that. My only question would be, is there any impact or negative impact of delaying moving forward? I don't know if there would be, or is it just a matter of the applicant granting a waiver?
It's just, as far as I understand, the action limit is Friday or Saturday. So the applicant would have to ask for a waiver for us to move ahead on this. I mean, I can't speak for the applicant, but I think if it comes down to us supporting this project with a waiver, if we can support a better design, I imagine Mr. Tedesco will be there, but we'll hear from him. But let's keep deliberating around that, Commissioner Washington.
Sure.
Commissioner Giraldo or Vice Chair Bailey?
Yeah, I'm still stuck on, it just looks too dense in the way it's designed. I'm not happy with it. I mean, it's really dense, and I just think, it was designed in such a way to maximize the number of towns, and I kind of agree with both you and with Commissioner Dorner that, we have to, safety is a primary concern. And I just don't know if, even with the proffers that was made by Mr. Tedesco, which I appreciate, it just seems like everybody is so isolated.
Thank you for that. And again, I know it's annoying to tie this to my one experience of my one development, right? But when I think of that Greenbelt Station experience, it was a wonderful place to live for a short period of time, because it was dense like this is dense. And it was so pedestrian friendly because everything oriented toward the green areas, the central parks and the other amenities. And so my experience is it works. And of course that experience is going to influence how I look at a development like this, which does not feel like it's oriented the same way at all. So Commissioner Giraldo, I think that's why I'm reacting the way I'm reacting about it. And because I look at this and I think, no, with just these little tweaks, and maybe that means you lose 5 or 10 townhomes to reorient this and to create that central park. That's okay, right? I mean, I know that hits the bottom line, but the bottom line for us is let's make this development work and let's bring the amenities to the people who live there, because they're a bit landlocked with the highways abutting it. Madam Vice Chair, thoughts, reactions?
It caused me to think a little bit more about it. I had not seen it the way you see it through your eyes initially. I relied on staff's interpretation and staff vision, a version of what they saw and how they felt when I looked at it. And I know that's not always the best thing to do, but that's where my source of information comes from in many situations. So I was not certainly opposed to either the design or when I initially looked at it. But now that you brought it up, and now that I've heard other discussion, I am beginning to look at it through a different set of lenses. And there may be something that we could do that could be done to highlight and make this a more community-friendly atmosphere. I don't know, I'm not sure, but I'd be willing to have staff and the applicant look at it again. But I don't think that we should prolong it forever and ever and ever, you know, but at some point, we definitely will have to make a decision about it and see what can be done and how it can work within that community. So it gives us an opportunity to see if an addition of vision works, and we will know when it comes back to us. But it was not my initial thought. My initial thought was
I
to
appreciate
support
that. And
what the
I feel the same
said,
way.
and I was good with that.
Yeah, I'm, you know, I'm with you, and it was a bit triggered by Commissioner Dorner's comments that got me thinking about this again, pulling back my own experience. So I appreciate your comments. So, commissioners, let me turn to actually Mr. Hunt. Again, you know, you represent the team as well. I want to make sure you hear and they hear that. You know, I feel like you all were doing your job and doing it well. And it is our prerogative to look at this through different lenses and to bring our own experience to it. So yes, it's sort of where Vice Chair Bailey was. I tend to look at things through your all's lenses. And in this case, like Commissioner Dorner, I'm just seeing a little bit more that I think we can do, and that's our authority. So, maybe the question then is to Mr. Tedesco. You're hearing us loud and clear where we are coming from, and how do you want to handle this?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the board for the opportunity to address you once again. We do hear you and understand exactly. And I think if you give the opportunity, not telling you what to do, but suggesting the opportunity for Mr. Hunt to perhaps respond. We haven't heard from staff since Mr. Shelley concluded his presentation. Despite all this back and forth, I would welcome the opportunity, if the board would allow it, for Mr. Hunt to be heard. I'm very, very confident that the applicant and staff prior to certification can work through all of these issues pursuant to proposed conditional language that requires it. You have full faith and confidence in your staff, and it's not unusual for the planning board to see things through a different lens, and the staff is quite aware of the direction the board's going in, as well as the applicant, and we have the opportunity to do that prior to certification that gets reviewed by your staff and the planning director. So I would suggest that, but I would welcome, hopefully, the opportunity for Mr. Hunt to be heard as well.
I'm open to that. And before we hear from Mr. Hunt, I think, commissioners, it's an interesting thing, right? Part of me wants to see the redesign, and part of me, and this goes back to where you were, Vice Chair Bailey, part of me just wants to authorize and trust the staff that they're hearing loud and clear where we're coming from, and they can work with the applicant to come up with that tweak on the design so that it meets where we're coming from. And I'm a little bit open to both, but Mr. Hunt, why don't we hear from you? See what you think.
Yes, sir.
Are we at risk of over authorizing you if we go down that road?
Oh, no, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. But yeah, for the record, James Hunt with the Development Review Division. I want to first of all, thank all the commissioners today for their comments on this detailed site plan. We do appreciate everything that you said. We have taken your comments into careful consideration. And just as that was discussed earlier, we really want to, if you allow us to do this, we'll be able to work with the applicant prior to certification and make this central park, more so a central park area that you're talking about. In addition to that, focus on the pedestrian crossings and making the crossings a lot more safe than what they are currently alluding to at this point in time. We're going to have definitely closer conversations with our transportation planning team relative to pedestrian safety. In addition to this, we'll be able to work with the applicant on redesigning the site to make it more functional and meet the requirements of what you all have indicated today. If you allow us to do that, we would be happy to do that. In addition to, we have already drafted up some recommended revised conditions as well, which Mr. Shelley is ready to read into the record. If you would like us to add anything to those particular conditions, staff is definitely amenable to those revisions as well.
All right. I mean, commissioners, I'm first of all, I'd very much like to hear from Mr. Shelley and you, Mr. Hunt. And commissioners, I'm open to this sort of modified approach, which is we hear from staff, we authorize them to move it in the direction that we've talked about, because these, even though it'll have a big impact in the grand scheme of this design, you know, it's a smaller piece but it's done right, and we can authorize staff to do that. I really like the pedestrian orientation of this and making sure you have the right markings and you know, wherever these paths are, so you're visually prioritizing pedestrians over automobiles. I think that's the key.
Absolutely.
So why don't we hear from Mr. Shelley, hear what those are, and then commissioners, we can talk to feel like if that's adequate or if we really do want Mr. Tedesco to come back to us. Mr. Shelley.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. And for the record again.
And Mr. Shelley, you heard the love, right?
Yes, thank you. For the record again, Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design section. The revised conditions that have been proffered by the applicant and reviewed by staff are as follows. A revision to condition E, striking the 645 parking spaces and stating that the parking proposed on sheet 1 of the DSP shall be corrected to reflect the revised central green area. Then for condition K, which is revise the recreational facilities construction timeline and the recreational facilities provided schedule on sheet 1 of the detailed site plan to reflect the recreation facilities plan and the recreational facilities cost estimate. The revision shall include the completion of phase 4 prior to the issuance of the 50th building permit instead of the 150th building permit. Then there are 3 additional conditions. Condition 1T, which would be revise the circulation of the private alley located on parcel O to end at lot 91, which shall be accepted and approved by the transportation planning section. The alley and parking removed shall be replaced with green space. Condition 1U, which is provide raised sidewalks that connect the site's sidewalks to the provided recreation facilities, or my apologies, provide raised crosswalk to connect the site's sidewalks to the provided recreation facilities. In condition 1V, which is the applicant shall further revise the layout to provide a central green area between recreational areas 1 and 2, which shall be accepted and approved by urban design staff.
Mr. Shelley, I have one question. I can't see well enough. When you say connecting areas 1 and 2, what are you talking about?
My apologies. Recreational area 1 is the playground. And recreational area 2 is the facilities further south, which are the gazebo, the ADA panels, etc. So we would be looking to revise the site layout in this vicinity to create that central green area that is proposed.
So what I'm looking at is the small yellow oval in the middle, and I'm looking at the larger yellow oval to the left of it.
Correct.
Is that what you're talking about?
Correct. And
right, so these 2 pieces gets reconfigured as, in some way, shape, or form, this gets reconfigured as the central green for this development, which means that those houses in the middle, you know, Commissioner Jordan, I thought, could they get rotated? Maybe they need to go away, but the bottom line is, maybe they get put somewhere else, but the bottom line is there will be a central green to this development that will be roughly the size of those 2 things combined.
Correct. And I would also like to state after receiving an additional comment that perhaps condition 1T would not be necessary that I read into the record based on the revision of the layout. Condition 1T that I read stated the circulation of the private alley, where that circulation would end, because that may be moot based on the revision to create the central green area.
That's right. That's right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Say. So, commissioners, we have a decision to make. Is that adequate? Do we, based on that, do we authorize staff to go back and to work with the developer? And when we come back, what will be approved is in the direction that we have talked about, but we authorize staff to work out the details of that with the applicant. Are we okay with that? I mean, the bottom line is, for me, feels good enough for me. It does.
Yeah, I'm perfectly
But
fine with it.
I'm good. How about the applicant? What's the applicant saying?
What is the time frame?
As I understand it, we would approve it with these new conditions, proffered conditions and changes, and then staff would just work with the applicant to make sure it gets done. I mean, that's what
Can I jump in, folks? Because I want Mr. Hunt to weigh in on this. Could you weigh in on to say something for the record related to this that could help inform us before we make a decision?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Just to kind of clarify here, staff is aware that, and we will, like I said, we'll continue to work with the applicant on this. This would, if the planning board does decide to vote to recommend approval based upon the recommended conditions, in addition to the conditions that Mr. Shelley has added or read into the record, we'll, like I said, continue to work with the applicant at the same time with the understanding that, some units will be lost. We understand that, but we're at the point we need to really work with the applicant on this to make that determination a little bit further in detail wise.
So the applicant needs to hear that loud and clear. Yeah.
So, but how does the applicant feel about that process is my question.
Yes.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Tedesco.
Thank you, Commissioner Giraldo. The applicant would agree to the revised conditions as Mr. Shelley read them and would respectfully request the board to move this forward today with the conditions as proposed, proffered and proposed by the applicant and staff. Prior to certification, these elements will be addressed and the site plan revised.
And you understand that this is very likely to mean you will lose some units.
We understand that it will require a redesign to satisfy the planning board's desire of this. If that's the end result, we understand that. Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'm not suggesting you have to lose units, but you very well may, and we are authorizing.
And I'm not conceding that we will, but I think we all recognize there's a possibility. Yes.
That's good enough for me. Mr. Hunt, that's good enough for you?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
So,
Chair, concerns?
Yeah, so I'm still concerned about the alleyways. Like, I'm not concerned about giving staff the leeway to kind of negotiate and work through this. I don't feel the need to micromanage stuff and get involved to that degree. But we still have this kind of zigzag alleyway that's there that right now I don't know what we're approving, because if the townhomes are rotated around and they lost some and it kind of came through, that might be one thing, but it's still like that central island area that, like, I don't know what we're approving. And that was kind of the danger area there, because if we, right now where that alleyway goes down out of that road and goes down to where we have the kind of brown units below that alleyway is dangerous for pedestrian activity right now, because there's no sidewalk running alongside the townhomes there. One way to do it, I had suggested kind of rotating those around, is because you could rotate around, drop a few units, and then just lose like part of like the interior space and have a connection going through. That would then turn these units into kind of an open area. If we were to lose kind of the alleyways around that island, you'd have a huge Central Park area. And if that's the goal, I would be supportive of the application to do that. And I would even be supportive of those townhomes turning into front-loading townhomes right there. If that's what it means, because they wouldn't have that back alleyway. But I don't really know what we're kind of going forward with if that's not kind of like the vision of what's being proposed.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I believe, as a representative of the applicant, and I'll defer to Mr. Hunt, but I believe that the conditions that Mr. Shelley read into the record drive towards that goal and to that result, Mr. Commissioner Dorner.
Okay. That's my understanding as well. I think that both the applicant and our staff is hearing loud and clear that there needs to be a central green, which means those 8-10 townhomes that are right there, they're going to get either reoriented, reduced, or they're not, short of it, they're not going to be there anymore. They may end up getting absorbed somewhere else in the development, but that issue will be moot with this central green redesign.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that, as long as we're not just sticking to like the existing stuff that we have right now. Like, I would not be supportive of that, and I would vote no today. But if staff understands that and that's okay, then I think we can move forward. Procedurally though, what happens if there's a disagreement between staff and the applicant in terms of like what the optimal design is?
We would not be able to get the DSP certified.
Right. Certification would not happen.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think that's a big enough threat for a small chunk of area, hopefully, to make it a winning kind of project.
All right, so bit of a work in progress. I feel like staff has the clear sense of where we're going with this. I mean, I think staff has done a good job and gotten us about 90% there from what I would like to see. This Central Park and the pedestrian orientation is key, and that may mean shifting of homes. And again, if Mr. Tedesco and his team doesn't want to hear it, it may even mean losing some units, but it doesn't mandate that by any stretch. And I think you've heard Commissioner Dorner's concerns and the other commissioners. And if there's no other thoughts or questions around this, Mr. Hunt, do you feel like you and your team have clear, Mr. Shelley, you have clear direction from us, clear enough direction from us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do.
Okay. All right, and commissioners, then what would be in order would be a motion to approve with the conditions that were proffered by the applicant and which staff is in agreement with as well.
Mr. Chairman, with that, I move that we adopt the findings to include the technical corrections as noted by staff at the top of his presentation. And with that, approve DSP-22028 and TCP2-003-2023, along with the associated conditions as outlined in staff's report, with conditions 1E and 1K modified as read into the record by staff, and the conditions as further modified by applicant exhibit number 1, and also to include the applicant proffered conditions 1U and 1V as read into the record by staff. And I would ask that staff would ensure the reordering is appropriate since he struck condition 1T as part of his final report.
Second.
And I think
Capture, Mr. Hunt?
Absolutely, we've got it.
Madam Vice Chair, you have something?
yes.
Okay. That was a motion and a second. Okay. So we have a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Under discussion, let me just say, clearly this is a different process for us. So I wouldn't quite call this an experiment, but I would say let's be mindful of how it works and what it feels like for staff to be authorized in this way, and for the applicant, be curious to hear as well. And we want to be mindful of this as well, but I think it feels appropriate because we want to both get it right, but also encourage the kind of development we think is helpful for the county. And so maybe this is the sweet spot, and let's see how it goes. Okay. So any other discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I just want to add to the discussion that when we get to the point or Simony gets to the point of having the DSP go forward and get confirmed, then I just want to see the image, not for like voting purposes or anything. It can even be after it. I just want to see kind of where you get to, so that way we know like what do we need to tweak. If we give this kind of authority out and allow like the benefit of the doubt, I just want to see kind of what comes up with it. I'm also just kind of curious to see how it ends up. And I'll thank Mr. Tedesco for being willing to entertain my criticisms, as well as staff too. I don't say it in any kind of like derogatory or attacking way, even if I may sound aggressive. I apologize if that happens. I just get interested in these projects, probably a little bit too much so. But I like this stuff. So thank you for indulging me.
Oh, I appreciate it. And for what it's worth, Commissioner, it's not only is it your job, but I think you really helped move this forward in a very productive way. So I appreciate what you did and what you said. So any other discussion on the motion? And I'm just as curious to see where this lands. So make sure that there's a reworked version of what you see in front of us, just for all of our curiosity as well. Okay. So with that, if there's no further discussion of the motion, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Well, this is definitely an experiment for me. I've never voted to see how it goes, but I vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Okay. I vote aye. I want to thank especially all of the residents who came in and expressed their views. I understand the legal argument, and we'll see what happens with that. And I appreciate the applicant being more flexible and understanding the concerns that we were expressing on behalf of future residents of the community. So I vote aye.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote as well. The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Tedesco. Thank you, Mr. Shelley, Mr. Warner, Mr. Hunt, for all of your work on this. And commissioners, I don't think we have anything else before us. Mr. Hunt, any further business from your side?
Mr. Chairman, there are no additional business items before the planning board today.
Thank you. So commissioners, without objection, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day.
And a good weekend.
You too.
This conference is no longer being recorded.